Honorable Speaker. It is, they live, you know, sometimes I even wonder, why are they being subjected to that kind of a situation? Honorable Speaker, if you go to Industrial Police Station today, you will find two families sharing one room, triangular Mabati room. It's called Uniport, not even Uniport. It is even smaller than Uniport. How do they subject police officers with families? Imagine with a curtain in between only. Just imagine, Honorable Speaker, your wife and the other police officer has his wife. There is only a curtain in between. How do they even manage? I really don't understand, Honorable Speaker. I don't understand. This is terrible. Honorable Speaker, you know, sometimes people condemn police officers, and I feel pity for them, honestly. You can find a police officer standing in a heavy rain controlling traffic. And then you say, ati wanachukua kitu kidogo. What do you mean by kitu kidogo? You know, yes. So finally, and the issue of
order, Senator
the statement by Senator Nyamu, the young man who was killed comes from Marsabit, and I would ask the police officers to do a thorough investigation and arrest the culprits as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Bass.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to also support the statement from Dr. Modik. Honorable Speaker, actually, the police officers in this country live in a pathetic situation. Poorly paid, poorly housed, most frustrated profession. Police officers are supposed to be living the best in this country because they do protect all our lives and our security. Honorable Speaker, as he rightly said, some of these officers are living in the unipost that was left by the Zungus. If you go to Nairobi in some of these areas, you will be surprised. You can't imagine how they're living. One of the things, Honorable Speaker, transfers are so regular. If you just disagree with the next immediate boss, then they're taken away to Turkana. Well, they have nobody to argue for them. They have no lawyers. Other thing, Honorable Speaker, many police officers are now frustrated and even committing suicide. Young men, graduates, poorly paid, they stay away from their families for many months because somebody in Turkana and the next day, his family is somewhere in Wajir or Mandera. So as a result of this, many of them are now become mentally and depressed. And therefore, I support the statement that we must look into the condition of police officers. Thank you so much.
Senator Oroba Gloria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to contribute on the statement on the welfare of police officers. Mr. Speaker, without belaboring the point, the Maraga task force put out a report, and that report has been filed. Mr. Speaker, this country, we are so used to writing things, reports, going for conferences, workshops, drinking tea, taking photos. Mr. Speaker, what we should be discussing is how far is the implementation of that report? Because on that report, it touches on the social welfare, housing, everything that we're talking about today in this Senate, Mr. Speaker. I have heard Senator Chute talking about housing and how two families are split by a curtain, Mr. Speaker. If you look at all the suicide and all this gender-based violence within the police force, whether it is their spouses or the actual police officers, Mr. Speaker, it is rooted. It is rooted in these conditions that we are subjecting them. And it pains me every time when I go on social media and people are just busy writing there, these police officers this, these police officers that. Yet when we come here, we are talking about the insecurity in Isili. Who do you expect is going to make sure that you are safe? It is those same police officers that you keep attacking, Mr. Speaker. So at one point, it is not only the material things, but even the mental health of these police officers. We have to ask ourselves as a society in this country, if we are constantly attacking the people who are supposed to offer us safety, how are we expecting those same people are going to make sure that we are safe in our houses, Mr. Speaker? So I want to support this statement and push that we are informed about the Maraga task force and the implementation of that particular report that was released. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Karen Nyamu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to support the statement by Senator from Maraga, Senator Joe Nyutu, on the amputee football team from Kenya that was stranded in Frankfurt, Germany, Mr. Speaker. I saw the images on social media, Mr. Speaker, and I could not believe that the team that we should be so proud of and support was actually stranded and was being helped by well-wishers in Frankfurt, Germany. And I was wondering, under what program did they travel? Wasn't there facilitation for accommodation and for all those expenses that they needed over there, Mr. Speaker? I can imagine the preparation that they went through here in the country so that they can qualify for that, you know, to be able to qualify on the world stage. And then instead of us appreciating them and honoring them, we neglect them. Is it because of their physical situation, or what is the ministry doing? You see, we keep saying we have the interest of the young people at heart and our sports people. But the grim image that we paint, even for the ones who would want to engage themselves in sports, is very discouraging, Mr. Speaker. On the statement by Mundigi on police welfare, the Maraga report exposed all this rot that we're talking about, on the promotions, on the corruption deep-rooted in the police system. We want to know the steps, and I happen to chair the Committee for National Security in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Vice Chair, I happen to be the Vice Chair. That is my vision. I'm sorry I spoke about my vision. I am patient. Slowly we will get there. So I happen to sit in that committee, and I am keen. I am very
Order,
keen.
honorable senators. May Senator Karen be heard in silence, please. Proceed, Senator.
I will be very keen to know the steps that we are taking to ensure that we prioritize resources to ensure that we actually implement that report step by step. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Miraj.
Asante Bwana Spika, na mimi nipende kuchangia hoja ama statement iliyoletwa na Seneta Mundigi wa Embu. Kwa hakika ni jambo la kutamausha kuona kwamba hali za maisha na mazingira ya maaskari wetu ni ya kusikitisha sana na liko katika hali mbaya. Bwana Spika, tukiregea nyuma tunaona kwamba tumekuwa na ruwaza nzuri. Nimeona maseneta wengi na nimewasikia wakizungumzia mazingira wanayoishi maaskari wetu, lakini wanasahau ruwaza ambayo rais wetu William Samoei Ruto alikuwa nayo wakati wa campaign na ambayo inaendelea kuwa implemented. Bwana Spika, masuala ya nyumba za bei nafuu ambazo pia zinatengezwa kwa minajili ya kuwapa mahali pazuri maaskari wetu ili waweze kupata mahali pazuri pa kuweza kuishi na familia zao na mahali kwenye hadhi nzuri. Bwana Spika, pia nikichangia statement ya Senator Nyutu kuhusu ile timu ya wale amputee ambao waliweza kujitayarisha na kuweza kupata fursa ya kuwakilisha taifa. Ni jambo la kusikitisha kuona kwamba hawakuwekewa matayarisho kabambe ya kuweza kuliwakilisha taifa letu. Kwa hivyo hata mimi ningependa kujua ni mikakati gani inaweza kufanyika kupitia wizara ili kuboresha wao kuweza kufanikiwa katika mashindano yale. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator S.C. Okenyuri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I also wish to comment on two statements, one by Senator Alexander Mudigi, by actually saying that as a society we need to value the sacrifice and work being offered by our security officers. And it's not just about protecting us, it's also about their welfare. Because if you also look at the cases of police officers who are committing suicide or killing their colleagues is on the upper side. So we need to look at all round how a police officer should be staying. And on Senator Joyce's statement on tree planting, this is a very critical assignment for this administration. And I think a serious assessment needs to be looked at so that we are not just placing emphasis on tree planting on that only occasion when we are planting trees. This needs to be ensured that students are also doing the same. Now that we have students closing schools, are we going to wait for students to come back so that they can take part in such a critical activity? We need to take a stock on the trees that have been planted. What progress is it that we are having? Have the trees dried up? Who is taking care of the trees? So generally, as Kenyan citizens, we need to have that culture within us so that we don't just do that on the tree planting day. So this is a very critical statement which needs to be addressed effectively. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, honorable senators, we have spent the maximum 15 minutes allowed under standing orders, and therefore we will move to the statement pursuant to Standing Order 57-1. The Senate Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 57-1 to hereby present the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, the 26th of November, 2024. Ordinarily, Mr. Speaker, this statement is presented every Thursday, but as members are aware, you communicated to the House yesterday that we have the State of the Nation address tomorrow, where the President will be addressing both Houses of Parliament at the National Assembly chamber. It therefore follows that this is our last day of sitting in this chamber for this week. Therefore, it's important to brief the House on the business for the coming week. The status of the legislative business, Mr. Speaker, is as follows. We have 54 bills that are pending conclusion, of which 36 are the second reading stage, 17 are the committee of the whole stage, and 1 bill is awaiting first reading. There are 30 motions that are pending conclusion. There are 26 petitions that are pending conclusion before the committees, of which 19 are actually due for reporting by the respective standing committees. 433 statements pursuant to Standing Order number 53-1. From the foregoing, it is evident that we need to redouble our efforts to conclude the business of the Senate before the Senate. However, I want to thank Honorable Senators, Mr. Speaker, for the divisions that were undertaken yesterday. The mediated version of the Water Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 33 of 2023, and the National Rating Bill, National Assembly Bills number 55 of 2022, are being finalized for presentations to His Excellency the President for assent, while there's a resolution on the motion relating to various water service providers will shortly be dispatched to the relevant government agencies for action. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other bills that were at the second reading stage have now been transitioned to the Committee of the Whole and will be scheduled accordingly by the SBC. In the same spirit, I want to urge Honorable Senators to to be present in the House so that we can conclude the business that is scheduled for division in today's order paper. On Tuesday, the 26th of November, Mr. Speaker, sir, the SBC will consider the business for the week. The tentative business for that week will include a motion to debate the President's address to Parliament pursuant to Article 132(1)(b) and (c) of the Constitution. Business not concluded from today's order paper, as well as business indicated in the notice paper. The tentative business for the morning sitting on Wednesday, 27 November 2024, will include the schedule of questions to the Cabinet Secretaries as provided by the SBC, as well as motions. As Senators will recall, the Cabinet Secretaries who are scheduled to respond to questions on Wednesday, the 13th of November 2024, did not appear. For this reason, SBC Committee resolved to reschedule these questions for Wednesday, the 27th, 2024,
These are including questions to the cabinet secretaries for health and tourism and wildlife. The business for the afternoon on Wednesday, 27 November, will include business not concluded in the order paper for Tuesday, 26th November, and will be the following. There are these bills, Mr. Speaker, which are the committee of the whole stage: the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihoods Bill, Local Content Bill, Early Childhood Education Amendment Bill, the Land Amendment Bill, Energy Amendment Bill, National Disaster Risk Management, Cooperative Societies Amendment Bill, County Governments Election Laws, the County Public Finance Laws, Election Amendment Laws, Mr. Speaker, and various statements, various bills that are at the second reading stage, which include the Heritage and Museums Bill, the County Hall of Fame Bill, Public Holidays Bill, County Assembly Services Bill, Wildlife Conservation, the Wildlife Conservation and Management Bill, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Amendment Bill, County Oversight and Accountability Bill, Civic Education Bill, County Statistics Bill, Statutory Instruments Bill, County Wards Equitable Development Bill, PFM Amendment Bill, the Creative Economy Support Bill, Livestock Protection and Sustainability Bill, the Sports Amendment Bill, County Governments Procedure Bill, the County Governments Amendment Bill, the County Library Services Bill, the Labor and Migration Services Bill, the Sports Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, though I don't have it in my statement, I think I have it in good authority of the chair, and there are members who are part of the Division of Revenue Mediation Committee that they have since concluded that exercise. Senator Faki confirms, who's a member of that committee, and therefore it will be important to notify the country that we will prioritize that business on Tuesday next week so that we can conclude on it. And with leave of the House and your permission, Mr. Speaker, we may even want to conclude both second and third reading actually on Tuesday, Mr. Speaker, given how much the country has been awaiting this decision. I've just seen a message on my phone here, Mr. Speaker, before rising to read this statement from one of the county governors informing me that they actually wish to know how long it will take, because many of them would wish to plan either for supplementary budgets and the like. And it's difficult for counties to make that decision, Mr. Speaker, before they eventually know what is the indicative figure that they are likely to get. Mr. Speaker, I know that by practice, the minute this mediation committee tabled their report, even before the passage of CARA, which is a subsequent to that bill, county assemblies will have a rough idea of what to expect and how to plan their finances accordingly. I know it has taken long, but I'm glad that finally, Mr. Speaker, this mediation exercise has been brought to an end, and counties can plan actually for the remainder of the financial year with a good mind. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that members of Budget and Finance Committee will immediately commence also on the CARA immediately after we are done with Division of Revenue, so that hopefully before we break for recess on the, I think on the 4th of December, Mr. Speaker, we conclude on both bills. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, how shall we appear before our electorate if we go before them half the year down the line without the instruments needed to run and operate the fiscal policies of our county governments? Therefore, I want to urge members of the Budget and Finance, like Senator Faki, the whip here, and the chairperson, and the vice, that they have their plate full. And if the House, our whips, Mr. Speaker, can rally the members of the House actually to be present for conclusion of those extremely critical business for the functioning of our county governments, Mr. Speaker, it'll be important. Mr. Speaker, I register my appreciation for the business that we were able to transact yesterday. We actually legislated for, I think, almost a record 4 hours yesterday, Mr. Speaker. Beyond speaking, members of the public need to understand that lawmaking is a process. And yesterday we were actually in it from about 3 o'clock all the way to 6:30. Doing various stages and various amendments, Mr. Speaker. We have a similar agenda later this afternoon, should we conclude on some of the bills that are before us. It's unfortunate we don't have the requisite number to conclude on the vote, but that does not stop us from proceeding with the legislative work subject to only division. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and hereby lay the statement on the table of the Senate. Thank you.
Okay, before I request the clerk to call the next order, I have this communication to make. Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon of visiting Kenyatta University Student Association, KUSA, 20th Congress members. The delegation comprises 74 students who are in the Senate for a one-day academic exposition. Now, Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcome visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator for Nairobi City, under 1 minute, to extend a word of welcome to the delegation.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. I can already hear objections from behind me because apparently there are alumni of KU seated behind me. But I want to challenge them that they should move closer to the Speaker, as I have done, so that it is easy for you to catch their eye, or for them to catch your eye, so that they can also be welcoming delegations. And I'm sure they can trust me with just welcoming students from KU, even if I didn't go to KU. And in fact, as I speak, Honorable Speaker, I want them to confirm if any of them have received an invitation from the delegation from KU to meet with the students outside, because I have received it here. I am sure they haven't received it. And there's a reason why those students are insisting on meeting the Senator of Nairobi. Because, you know, sometimes senators from, I don't want to say the county, but Honorable Speaker, let me just do what you have asked me to do, to welcome the students from Kenyatta University Students Association, to wish them a fruitful visit at Parliament. Today is a good day to visit. Unfortunately, in the morning, as the Majority Leader has alluded to, there was a bit of a stalemate with the question of division of revenue, but as I said, we have reached some sort of way forward, which we will be trying to persuade our colleagues in the House to support, given what we saw there. I know that the whip is looking at me with a very stern look, because he might not be very happy with what we have to report. But we will be looking to persuade Olekina. I want to assure the students from KU that despite how Olekina looks like, his demeanor, he's an amiable fella, and you can actually have conversations with him and convince him on a few things, including the division of revenue. So I wish the students well. I heard that they are in the student leadership. Many here started their politics in student leadership, and I hope that they can learn something here. Unfortunately, I wouldn't advise them to follow in the footsteps of Senator Khalwale, but he says that he's a former student leader, and they can see that they are here. So we hope that this will be a learning opportunity for them, and I want to guarantee them that the Senator of Nairobi is available for you to just shake hands and take photos and exchange ideas outside there. And those who are shouting, Honorable Speaker, should join me out there, so that there are certain responsibilities that come with welcoming delegations here, so that you are not just shouting here, but when the rubber meets the road, you behave like the Senator of Nairobi. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Kajwang, you may also extend a word of welcome.
Yes,
and assume the responsibilities.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. I'm an alumni of Moi University, just like the Majority Leader. But Moi University, during its days of glory, when it was the second university, just before Kenyatta University was established. But Mr. Speaker, these are student leaders, and I want to encourage them. I was also a student leader. I was the Secretary General of the Moi University Students Organization. I want to encourage the leaders that they need to build a profile that looks at Kenya as a nation. We were with the Majority Leader at Moi University recently, and we addressed Akamkunji. And we encouraged the students to desist from these district associations. These associations of Nandi Students Association, Homa Bay Student Association. What we lack in this country is patriotism and a nationalist approach to issues. And I want to encourage the students, and I know that they've just gone through their elections. Build a nation, build union, build unity amongst the students of Kenyatta University. Mr. Speaker, we saw in the news that these students sitting in the gallery might not sit exams because their lecturers are on strike. I want to encourage the chair of the Education Committee, my vice captain in athletics. And I know he's able, and I know he's capable, and I know he's no longer fearful. You can no longer sell fear to him. Please call the minister in charge of education, sit down with him and the vice chancellors of our public universities. We have a serious crisis brewing in our education sector. Mr. Speaker, Moi University, the university we went to, is collapsing. Very soon, Mr. Speaker, you're going to have a problem with Senator Aaron and I, because if you try to establish the university we went to, you might find it does not exist. I don't know what that will mean for our academic qualifications. At Kenyatta University, there's a problem. At Machakos University, there's a problem. At Jomo Kenyatta University, there's a problem. Yesterday, lecturers came to Parliament to present petitions. Mr. Speaker, for the sake of the leaders who have come from Kenyatta University, let this House, before we go on recess, find a day, do an adjournment motion, so that we can discuss the crisis in the education sector, not confined to the universities, but even in primary school and secondary school. Mr. Speaker, we must press the government. We must come here in the same numbers that we came in on the impeachment day to press the government to prioritize the most important social sector, which is education. And I want to assure the students from KU that this House is up to the task, and the chair of the education committee is up to the task. And Chairman Joe Nyutu, when you call the VCs, if you need some firepower, you can call some of us like Senator Sifuna and the others, so that we can put the VCs online for the sake of our boys and girls at the universities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the delegation.
Thank you. Now, honorable senators, for the convenience of the House, I will rearrange today the sequence of today's order paper pursuant to Standing Order 45-2. We will instead handle order number 15. Thereafter, we'll resume normal flow as contained in the order paper of the day. Clerk, proceed to call that order.
Order number 15, the Public Fundraising Appeals Bill, Senate Bills number 36 of 2024. Second reading.
The Majority Leader. Now, honorable senators, we had started debate on this bill, and at the interruption of debate, Senator Karungo was actually had the floor, and I'm not seeing Senator Karungo today. Therefore, the floor is open for debate. Senator James Mrango, you had already contributed to this bill. Senator Joe Nyutu, you may proceed. The Public Fundraising Appeals Bill. Senator Jonut, if you need time to organize your thoughts, Senator Wakoli, you want to organize your thoughts? That's okay. Senator Mundigi.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa ruhusa niweze kuchangia mjadala ambaye itakuwako wakati wa siasa. Bwana Spika, mimi naomba kupinga kwa sababu najua katika Kenya kila kitu iko katika demokrasia. Wakati utapitisha mjadala hii italeta shinda katika Kenya kwa sababu kuna matajiri na masikini, na pia tunajua kuna mjadala ambaye tulipitisha kila mmoja anang'ang'ania kiti ya umbunge ama kiti ya MCA ama kiti ya seneta, yoyote anaweza kusimama. Na wakati tunapitisha mjadala kama huu, italeta shinda kwa sababu itafanya ukute hata watu wengine wamegojeka, na watu wengine watapata njia ya kusimamisha kama kuna mambo ya magonjwa, kwa sababu wengine wako na pesa na wengine watakuwa na pesa. Kwa hivyo mimi napinga mjadala ambaye ya kupitisha vile watu watakuwa naomba parua wakati wa kuchangisha pesa. Ningeomba, kwa sababu nchi ya Kenya ni nchi ya demokrasia, tuwe na uhuru wa kila kitu upande wa siasa. Ambaye atakuwa na pesa atajua vile ataomba pesa yake kwa wale wako na pesa, na yule anataka kuchangiwa atajua vile atafanya, tuweze kusaidia mwananchi wa Kenya, kwa sababu tunajua mambo ya kisiasa sio mambo ambaye hatuna umbaya na mtu yoyote, aidha ako na pesa hana pesa, iwe ni kitu ambaye iko na uhuru. Kwa hivyo mimi napinga mjadala ya mambo ya kupitisha vile mtu anafaa apate parua ndio aweze kufanya harambee. Asante Bwana Spika.
You may proceed, Senator Newt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a report of the Standing Committee on Education on a petition to the Senate regarding the Discrimination by Teachers Service Commission, TSC, on payment of hardship and enhanced house allowances.
Now, Senator Newt.
Yes.
We are debating the bill. We are debating the bill. So I called you to debate, to contribute to the bill.
This same bill. Oh, sorry.
Now, honorable senators, for clarity, we are now handling order number 15, which is the Public Fundraising Appeals Bill, which is now on the floor for debate. Senator Mungatana.
Bwana Spika, napenda kuchukua nafasi hii kwanza kukupatia asante kwa kunipa nafasi na mimi kutoa maoni yangu kuhusu mjadala ambao unahusika mambo ya harambee. Harambee katika Kenya, Bwana Spika, zimekuwa na shida. Katika historia ya Kenya, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta aliweza kuweka Wakenya wote pamoja kwa mwito wa harambee. Na harambee, Bwana Spika, ni jina ambalo liko na msingi wa Kihindi ambayo inasema ni kuvuta pamoja. Na ukweli wa mambo ni kwamba hili lilikuwa ni wazo zuri na limesaidia watu wengi katika Kenya hii. Shida imekuja kwamba kuna wengine ambao wametumia nafasi hiyo vibaya. Na ni kweli kabisa kuna watu ambao wametumia harambee vibaya. Tunasikia kwa mfano, wewe ni mheshimiwa ama ni kiongozi wa tabaka fulani, umeenda mahali kuomba Mwenyezi Mungu na haukuenda kwa mambo ya harambee, lakini hapo hapo watu wanajipanga, mara mnaanza kuambiwa kuna shida hii, kuna shida hii, kuna shida hii. Kwa hivyo mheshimiwa ama mtu fulani ukiwa unaondoka ujue kuna haya. Kwa hivyo ni kweli kabisa kwamba kuna watu ambao wamekuwa wakitumia nafasi hii na harambee hizi kutekeleza mambo ambayo sio ya kisawa, mambo mabaya. Na saa ingine pia, Bwana Spika, tumekusha kusikia kwamba tunafanya harambee alafu pesa hizo hazitumiki kwa ile mpangilio ambayo harambee hiyo ilifanywa, ama pengine harambee inafanyika na watu waliokusanya ile pesa hawajui ni pesa ngapi kamili ilipatikana na hiyo pesa itatumika namna gani kwa harambee ambayo imepangwa. Na Bwana Spika, pia unajua kwamba watu wamekuja kuielewa harambee kwamba ni namna fulani ya kusukuma mawazo ya watu kuelekea pale pengine ambapo unataka. Na sheria hii ama mswada huu unasema kwamba viongozi ambao wako mamlakani, tabaka fulani fulani, wasifanye harambee. Mimi Bwana Spika, nimeangalia huu mswada na nimeangalia watu wetu wa Tana River, na nitasema ya kwamba kwetu sisi Tana River, watu wetu ambao wanatuita harambee, wanatuita kwa sababu ya shida. Kwa hivyo wewe kama ni kiongozi, na si lazima uwe ni mheshimiwa. Kuna watu ambao ni walimu, kuna watu ambao ni madaktari, kuna wafanyi biashara mashuhuri ambao pengine Mwenyezi Mungu amewafungulia neema zake. Sasa watu wakiwa na shida, mtu amepata ajali, mtoto yuko hospitali, bibi yuko hospitali, ama pengine ni ugonjwa, watu hawana bima na wamezoea ya kwamba kifo kikikupata, Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, unatafuta familia yako wanaona kwamba hiyo pesa ambao wamekusanya haitoshi, na mazishi yako bei ghali, kwa sababu lazima watu wale, mwili utolewe kutoka mochari uletwe, watu walale usiku. Kikwetu watu wanaimba nyimbo usiku mzima, alafu asubuhi ndio watu wanaenda kuzika pale kanisani. Sasa Bwana Spika, ukiniambia mimi kama senator wa Tana River ya kwamba leo nipige kura ama nizungumzie mswada ambao unasema mimi nisaidie watu wangu, Bwana Spika, siwezi kubaliana na wewe kabisa. Na ninaomba Senate, bunge letu hili, na bunge na wabunge wenzangu katika bunge la Senate, tuache mambo yawe open, yawe wazi. Ikiwa wewe unaona kwamba hutaki kufanya harambee, basi usifanye harambee. Ikiwa wewe unaona kwamba harambee ile mtu amekufa na watu wana shida pale na unaweza kusaidia, wasaidie. Unaweza kufanya harambee ya wagonjwa, wasaidie. Watoto wamekwama shule, basari ndio hizi, Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, hazipatikani. Watoto wengine wanaambiwa mpaka uende uripoti kwanza ndio utapata basari. Tafadhali, kama mtu amepata nafasi na Mwenyezi Mungu amembariki, hata kama ni kwa kidogo, yeye ni mwalimu mkuu mahali, yeye ni mfanyi biashara mahali, yeye ni DO mahali, ni DC mahali, ama yeye ni mjumbe wa county, yeye ni mjumbe wa Senate, yeye ni mjumbe wa bunge la National Assembly, ama ni waziri, ama ni nini, kwa nini tuwafungie baraka zao? Sisi tunafundishwa katika Biblia, Bwana Spika, ya kwamba mtu anayetoa anabarikiwa. Kwa hivyo kama kuna nafasi ya kupata baraka zile za Mwenyezi Mungu, kwa nini tusizipate? Mimi nilikuwa naomba sana Bwana Spika, tusipitishe sheria ambazo ziko kinyume na matakwa ya wananchi wetu. Wananchi wetu kule mashambani, mimi sijui hapa town, pengine hapa town watu wana pesa, pengine hawataki wao kufanya maharambee, lakini sisi we live with these things. Bwana Spika, tunaishi na hizi shida, na wajumbe wetu wa makaunti kule wanasema, Mheshimiwa nisaidie, nimezidiwa. Sasa kama mjumbe wa kaunti anakuambia umsaidie, alafu unakataa, Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, tumepitisha sheria hii. Sheria Bwana Spika, wananchi hawataikubali, kwa sababu wananchi ndio wanatuambia tuwasaidie, na si kitu ya uongo ama ujanja. Nyumba nyingi wale ambao tunaenda katika counties zetu, nyumba nyingi watu wako na shida, kuna shida, watu hata chakula hawana. Alafu umeenda kutafuta chakula huko, umepigwa na nyati ama umeumwa na mamba huko mtoni, alafu mtu anakuambia ati sasa kuna sheria inasema huwezi kwenda kwa MCA wako umuombe msaada, huwezi kwenda kwa MP wako umuombe msaada, ama yule ambaye ameandikwa walimu hapo umuombe msaada, ama yule. Mheshimiwa Bwana Spika, mimi hii sheria sioni kama itatusaidia, na haisemi mambo ya wananchi. Na nataka kueleza namna hii. Bwana Spika, kuna sheria ambazo tumepitisha hapa Kenya ambazo baadaye tumekuja kujuta. Na kuna sheria ambazo zinasukumwa na watu fulani kama NGOs. Wanasukuma sheria fulani ati tufanye hivi, ndivyo dunia inavyoenda na nini. Halafu hizo sheria hazizungumzi sawasawa na matakwa ya wananchi ambao wametuchagua hapa. Halafu baadaye kidogo unaona sheria hizo zinaanza kutupiga kule mashinani. Bwana Spika, mimi nasema haina haja kuandika sheria ambayo itasema kama mtu ako na nafasi zake na mwenzake amekuja ameweka mchango, hatuwezi kumsaidia. Kwa hivyo mimi Bwana Spika, huu mswada kama ni kuupitisha lazima ukue amended, ubadilishwe, upatiane watu nafasi. Na kama kuna pingamizi lolote Bwana Spika, kama kuna shida mahali ama turekebishe, irekebishwe. Lakini kusema ya kwamba ati masenators, ati mawaziri, ati walimu, ati madio, ati madaktari ambao kwa sababu umeandikwa na ama wahandisi ama wafanyikazi wa serikali, ati kwa sababu umeandikwa na serikali huwezi kuja usimame kwa harambee usaidie wananchi wako. Bwana Spika, mimi sioni kama hilo ni wazo zuri, na ninaomba bunge letu la Senate tuangalie huu mswada. Jameni, tujadili vizuri, tuuelewe. Tusije tukapitisha sheria ambayo ukirudi nyumbani unaenda kutandikwa nayo. Kwa hayo mengi Bwana Spika, in principle mimi sikubali huu mswada. Nataka mswada ambao utatupatia nafasi wale wanaoweza kutoa watoe, wapate baraka zao. Wale ambao hawako kwa nafasi, Mungu atakuja kuwasaidia, wataendelea nazo. Lakini kuzuia mtu, Bwana Spika, mimi sipo hapo. Asante kwa nafasi hii ya kutoa mawazo yangu. Thank you very much.
Senator Richard Onyonka.
Ndugu Spika, nimesikia ndugu yangu Mungatana akizungumza, nikajiuliza sijui yeye ameishi nchi gani. Kwa sababu ndugu Spika, sababu huu mswada umeletwa hapa si eti ni mswada ambao unamkataza mwananchi wa kawaida ama kiongozi yule ambaye ana hela ya kulipa ama asaidie mahali kuna ugumu atoe hiyo hela. Shida iliyoko huu mswada haja yake ni kuhakikisha kuwa wale ambao ni viongozi tumekuwa tukiiba rasilimali za wananchi, halafu tunaenda mpaka kwa matanga ndio kwenda kuonyesha wale watu maskini kwa wewe unaweza kulipa shilingi 1200 kumzika mtu aliyefariki, lakini wakati ulikuwa kiongozi haukuamka kuzungumza vile atatibiwa kwa hospitali ambako hamna madawa. Sheria ambayo tunataka kubadilisha ni kutoa ufisadi kutoka kwa kusaidia watu maskini, kwa sababu vile tunavyosaidia watu maskini tuna pretend kuwa tunawasaidia, lakini hatusuluhishi yale mashida ama zile shida ambazo nchi yetu inazo. So ndugu zangu wale mko hapa, mnaweza kufanya amendment, nakubali na nyinyi, lakini wacha niwaambie hivi: kwa sababu sisi ndio tumeharibu uongozi wa nchi yetu, kwa sababu sisi ndio mafisadi wakubwa, kwa sababu sisi ndio tumapretenda wakubwa, barabara ni mbaya, hospitali ni mbaya, madawa hakuna hospitali, maji hayako nyumbani, alafu ukisikia mtu ana diarrhea unasema tumia hao jamaa, watu washakufa, tutamzika ki. Ningependa kuwauliza nyinyi viongozi hapa, huu mswada uendelee hivyo hivyo, tutoe ufisadi kutoka kwa kusaidia mtu maskini, ili ukitoa pesa kanisa ama ukitoa pesa kwa mchango, tumia Safaricom na useme hiyo pesa ulitoa wapi, ukaleta kunitolea wakati nimefariki, kwa sababu wakati ambako nilikuwa mgonjwa hakukuwa na madawa. Asante ndugu Speaker.
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, taking over from where the Senator of Kisii has left, I want to remind colleagues that this is our baby.
when we rose to respond to the disaster of the Gen Z, one of the things we resolved upon in this House, in that great debate that we had never seen before, was that we had to address the displeasure by the young people on how we spend all our time showing off opulence, choppers, vehicles that cost over 51 million shillings. And the youth, because they are better educated than what our generation was at their time, they are able to relate your income to what you contribute in Harambee. So we said, let us regulate this. The intention of this bill, and I want to urge colleagues, let us read it. The intention is not to abolish Harambees. The intention is to sanitize. The intention is to make it decent. The intention is to make sure that we don't hide in Harambees to practice corruption. How can you accept the fact that you are taking your ill-gotten money to a funeral of a mass accident like the one we had in Ekolomani at Iko River, Lukose? You take those millions, and yet the reasons why the accident took place is the bad state of the roads. If you had a dual carriage from Nairobi to Kakamega to Busia and Uganda, the accidents that take place on these roads would be cut by over 80%. So, Senator Mungatana, thank you very much for your passion, but the point is, don't give us money which you have stolen, which would have fixed the roads, and those bad roads have caused us to die. Don't bring us that money. Allow the police to come after you so that you can be brought to order.
What is your point of order, Senator Mungatana?
Did you? Yes, Mr. Speaker, did you hear the senator from Kakamega, my very good honorable friend, say that they don't bring us the money that you have stolen? Mr. Speaker, is it a presumption that every person who actually, out of his good heart, or out of the problem that is there, and I'm speaking from about my county, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, Kakamega, maybe they are rich, Mr. Speaker. People are dying of hunger. If you get something and you want to help, is it a presumption, Mr. Speaker, that the people who are helping, the teachers, the doctors, the more prosperous farmers are thieves? Mr. Speaker, can Mr. Kalwale, Honorable Kalwale, my very good friend, please stop playing to the gallery and address the issues? I don't think that is a correct statement, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mungatana, I don't think the Honorable Senator for Kakamega meant what you've just said. Indeed, if you remember during the debate on the state of the nation, none other than honorable senators were of the view, and that was after listening to the general public, that there could be dirty money that gets its way into the Harambees. And therefore, it's important to bring transparency in the Harambees. It's decent to bring some accountability in the way we do these Harambees. And out of that concern that the House had, and in fact, this House went to resolve certain actions to be taken. One of them is basically to legislate and bring sanity in the Harambee space. So yes, there's that general perception. And not everybody who contributes in a Harambee is a thief. But as you know, if I might use a Kiswahili saying, samaki moja kioza, bahari mzima imeoza. So this particular piece of legislation is to address that particular one thief and leave there 1,000 wonderful people. But at least that particular one person who we are not sure of how their sources of, these funds, the fund do not make its way into the hands of the public. That's why this law is proposed. But I do not think the Honorable Senator for Kakamega had an ill motive by saying that some of this money that would have otherwise fixed a road ended up in the wrong hands, and it is that money that is coming at the tail end to bury victims of that very bad road, which bad road came as a result of the money that had been maybe stolen. So it is that space that we are trying to clean up. There are good people who will bring their hard-earned money, and there are those questionable amounts that still find the way. So to clean up, to make sure that we have good money in this Harambee ecosystem, the proposed law is just to sanitize that space. Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't have put it better. And I truly want to thank you. This bill is not a joke. Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant for drugs in hospital. And thanks to that shortage, patients die and they come to bury us. Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant to fix our roads. Mr. Speaker, they go ahead and buy four-wheel drives that can avoid potholes and buy choppers, and courtesy of those bad roads, when we die, they come to show us. We don't want that money. Mr. Speaker, in Tana River, I have had the choice and pleasure for 6 years to practice medicine in the Coast Province. And I know what poverty has done, not just in Western, but in Coast. So, Mr. Speaker, there is still money meant to improve the productivity of the lands in Coast so that they allow the people of Tana River to come to them through Harambees begging for food. Mr. Speaker, through this law, we don't want that kind of money. And Mr. Speaker, this law has been very well thought through. When you read through, Mr. Speaker, it is not casual. Let me respond, for example, to the concerns in this bill of the Senator of Tana River. We have Part Roman 3, which speaks to fundraising appeals. And they say, Mr. Speaker, in Clause 8, that the provision of this part shall not apply to a private fundraising appeal where the solicitation is made from members of for beneficiaries of the nuclear family or relatives and does not extend to members of the public. Clearly, this bill is going to allow us to sit as a family in Marinya, a family in Idaho, and do our fundraising. What they are against is public fundraising. And the law has gone further, Mr. Speaker, in Clause 9, has created distinction between public and private fundraising. It is the public fundraising that we want to control. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, wish to appeal to colleagues. Let's go through this proposal with a tooth comb so that we can refine it for it to be better. Are you saying this thing is a joke? When you saw a few days ago, none other than the Catholic bishops of Kenya speak to this issue. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, in unprecedented action, Archbishop Anyolo, who for the information of this House, is a man born from Shinyalu, and he's the Archbishop here in Nairobi. Philip Anyolo has done the unthinkable. He has returned money to politicians. So when you say we are doing something that does not appeal to the public, knowing that Catholics control over 50% of the Christians in this country, knowing that the Catholics have permeated all our villages and they could possibly be the voice of the poor who we pretend to be assisting when actually thieves are using that opportunity to sanitize money that they have stolen from our coffers. We must address it so that on Sunday, when I go to church, when you go to church, when all our other politicians go, including the head of state, he can comfortably make his contribution without any worries as to the interpretation. And this law has gone further, Mr. Speaker. They have said in this law, in clause 11, they have put exemptions. Exemptions are here. Senator for Narok, if you go to clause 11, they tell you money or property collected by or under the authority of a recognized representative of a religious association is exempted. It means once the law is true, we can then go to Archbishop Anyolo and give him our contribution to help the church to be constructed. I would be the last person, Mr. Speaker, to fight the Harambee spirit, because if it had not been for the 100 shillings in 1976, which Mwiriza Lihalanganga gave me as a contribution to my Harambee, I would not have finished my education in Msingo High School. Mr. Speaker, Msingo High School, one of the top schools in this country, was started by the spirit of Harambee. Shibwe Hospital today, which I have created from a dispensary, that dispensary was started by Harambee. So Harambee is good, but unregulated, you leave it to where you see people using it to sanitize the money they steal from us. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by acknowledging that this is indeed a difficult decision to make, because somebody who will not take trouble to read this law, he will think you are against charitable activity. No. In fact, one of the charitable organizations that I belong to, Touch Africa, where I'm a director of the foundation, was started by the late Michael Kijana Wamalwa because he believed in touching people. We want to touch people, but touch them with honor and touch them not when we are taking advantage of them. Mr. Speaker, I support strongly and I propose that at the right time we'll come with proposals to amend so as to make this bill better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, let me begin by saying that I have no beef with people coming together to be able to help one individual improve their status of living. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in a society where we encourage a lot of the Harambee movement, but I believe that the pace which we are taking now, Mr. Speaker, to be able to regulate fundraisings is completely ill-advised. And I say so, Mr. Speaker, because I've taken some time to read through this fundraising bill. And I do not support the proposals which are being made in this bill. Mr. Speaker, we are a society, a country, which now we should be working hard to ensure that every citizen has got access to free health care. We should be working so hard, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that every student, every young kid born from the Bundus of Narok or from the other Bundus of Lake Turkana are able to get access to quality and free education as well as healthcare. Mr. Speaker, what we are doing now by regulating this kind of fundraising is by making sure that we are condemning this generation into poverty. Mr. Speaker, I completely detest that approach. I've sat down there listening to the Chief Whip talking about when he went to school that he could not have finished school without Harambee. That is very true to all of us. But are we going to stagnate and stay there for the rest of our generation? Or are we going to do things differently? Earlier on, in the morning session, Mr. Speaker, we had the Cabinet Secretary of Housing, Lands and Housing. And she made the statements here and said that Narok County, with 6 sub-counties, will be entitled to a minimum of 220 houses per sub-county. That makes it about 1,320 houses for Narok County. When I stood to inquire further on that, she said that that is just the beginning. Mr. Speaker, I want to invite my colleagues for us to discuss here is how do we make sure that if our funds are being deducted from our salaries, we can guarantee that those who have not been given an opportunity to get where we are, the state takes that responsibility. When you now require us to profile individuals who are going to be carrying out fundraising activities, Mr. Speaker, the only thing that I conclude is that we are content with being poor, and we are content with widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Mr. Speaker, you cannot say that you will maintain an annual register of persons licensed by it to conduct a public fundraising appeal under this act. You go further and you say that you are now going to have a cabinet secretary who is going to authorize. You go further and you say that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, you're going to have a CC member who is going to keep a register. I think, Mr. Speaker, we are losing. We are completely losing our trajectory in terms of development in this country. If we were arguing, if the sponsor of this bill was saying, let us now regulate charitable organizations. Let us register charitable organizations that can be able to spell out their mission and goals. We regulate them and allow them to carry out fundraising. In America, where I spent almost 20 years of my life, we had non-profit organizations, we have charitable organizations, but now when it comes here and you're saying you want to be able to profile individuals and keep a list of individuals, I wish we were talking about keeping a list of charitable organizations. I think we need to change, Mr. Speaker. We need to start saying, when did the rain start beating us to a point where now primary schools we are paying them, when we had made progress, when the late president came into power, where kids could easily go to school for free. Right now, Mr. Speaker, if you ask any of these members who are seated here to show you their phones, there is a Harambee invitation for Harambee to pay for kids to go to school. There's a Harambee for a person to go to hospital. And then, Mr. Speaker, in this bill, it talks about, which I really detest completely. It says, this is an act of parliament to provide a framework for regulations in the conduct of public fundraising appeals to promote transparency and accountability in carrying out of fundraising appeals and foster great philanthropy. How do you foster great philanthropy when everybody in this country knows that the only people who can come up with money are politicians? Aren't you just encouraging corruption then? Aren't you encouraging an issue where you are elected into office because of how much you can be able to give instead of meritocracy? I think we need to focus on developing this nation. We need to come up with policies that will ensure that we narrow this gap between the rich and the poor, those who have and those who have none. We made progress by introducing a new constitution, where now we have counties. You know, even the way we make legislation, Mr. Speaker, has got to change now completely. It has got to change. I long for the time that we will be sitting here and saying, in Tana River County, the residents of that county have decided that every child in that county will go to school for free, and that the money that they are being taxed will be able to be directed there. But now, if we are even regulating fundraising, and then in this same law you say you are excluding, I like what my good friend Boni Halwale said, we are excluding family fundraising activities. You know, I mean, seriously. I want to beseech all of us that we move away from this kind of legislation. We are over-legislating. I want to beseech all of us that we sit down and say, how are we going to make sure that we develop policies that will ensure that in future, a granddaughter of the majority whip or majority leader will be able to go to school and not having to worry about harambes. You know? Yes. You know, this issue of majority leader for us keep on saying harambe, harambe, harambe is really pushing us back. We were profiled as a less developed country. We went up to now a medium developing country, a developing country. We have now gone to a point where now we are saying there are those developed nations. And when we go to these international conferences, and I'm sure my good brother, the chair of PAC, will tell you that when they went to COP29, our presidents did not even go. So it was just a room full of individuals who have got dreams but cannot be able to implement them. They were just talking about, we want to give Africa $1.3 trillion just because we spent $3 trillion in promoting warfare among countries. It's a talk shop. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with the sponsor of this bill, my good brother, my good friend, the majority leader, to change, to amend everything and say, let us regulate charitable organizations. That is number one. I will support him 100% on that. Number two, let us ensure that we've registered these non-profits such that if they are supported by an entity outside the country, whatever is imported here is not taxed again at the airport. Because you've seen, I'm sure the majority leader has received so many phone calls from NGOs saying, these books were donated to us, but they are now asking us to pay taxes. So, to save this, let us not limit it down to individuals. Let us come up with the proper regulations of charitable organizations. Let us persuade each county to say, what is the biggest problem? Recently, Mr. Speaker, I saw a Gazette notice where the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs has decided to give immunity, to one charitable organization called the Melinda Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And in the reasoning of giving that immunity, there's one word that caught my attention. This is a charity organization that has been set up to fight poverty. And that is now where we are giving them immunity. But that immunity only extends to expatriates who come and work in this country. But Kenyans who would have been co-opted to work in that company will not be immune. Come on. Why are we creating these different classes? Why are we profiling people? So I want to support, and I plead with Majority Leader, because he's one young man who is very, very intelligent and has really managed to change a lot of things, that let us, during the Committee of the Whole, change the act or the proposed legislation. Let us strictly regulate charitable organizations. Once we regulate those charitable organizations, the role of counties can now come in and say, because we all know our counties. We all know the status of our counties. We are informed by Session Paper number 10 of 1965. We are informed by the current situations of our Division of Revenue Bill, our CARA, how money is divided. We are informed by the debate that we have on a daily basis of how we divide revenue, whether by the size of the land or by the number of people who are there. We are informed by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics that tells us about the poverty in our counties. Why can we then ensure that in each and every county, Mr. Speaker, charitable organizations that are set up to work there are helped, assisted, and they are registered based on the circumstances of each of that county? There will be no interest of you supporting a charitable organization that is coming to Narok to be able to count wild animals. What for? But if you're telling me that you will go to West Pokot and ensure that you are funding a charitable organization that brings people together for cohesion, make sure that it supports education, I'll be among the first one to say, let's go for it. So, Mr. Speaker, to end, I would like to see this bill becomes law, but let us make it such that it doesn't profile people. Number two, such that it doesn't keep us stagnating. Let us now think like these developed nations that want to sponsor this charity organization. And you will know something, Mr. Speaker, as I wind up. A lot of these charity organizations will raise $1 billion. And they will say, we are going to fight poverty in Africa. And they will say, for Kenya, we'll give Kenya $200 million. I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, and this is a fact, and you can go check. By the time that money lands to Kenya, 80% has gone into administration. Only 20% is what ends up fighting that poverty. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an area that I'm quite vast, and I want to support the Majority Leader in regulating charitable organizations. We want to make it easy for people to be able to improve their standard of living. If today I want to go to Senator Kipsang's home and support a local church there, I should not be regulated to do that, really. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chimera.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Hata mimi pia niweke kauli yangu kwa mswada huu, Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, nimesikiza changizo za viongozi wenzangu kwa mswada huu, Bwana Spika. Na nimeona ni kama tunakingana kimawazo, Bwana Spika. Kuna wale ambao wamelichukulia swala lote hili kimakosa na kwamba wakaona sababu kuu ambayo ni kwa nini sheria hii imefika katika bunge letu la Seneti hii siku ya leo, Bwana Spika, ni kutokana na ule msukumo wa wale vijana wetu Gen Z ambao kwamba wao, na mimi naungana mkono na wao pia Bwana Spika, naunga mkono wao kwa sababu pia tuliona kweli hapo awali kwamba viongozi, baadhi ya watu katika nyadhifa mbalimbali katika uongozi katika nchi hii waliweza kuonekana kwamba wapo mstari wa mbele kufanya harambe ambazo ni za kutishia mno. Kutishia kwamba kile kiwango ambacho wanatoa katika harambe zile Bwana Spika kumradhi, kilikuwa kiwango cha juu zaidi. Na viongozi wengi ukiangalia mstakabala wao Spika, ukiangalia ule mshahara ambao tunapokea kama maseneta, kama wabunge, kama ma-MCAs, kama magavana na kama makatibu na mawaziri Bwana Spika, hailingani na kile kiwango ambacho wanatoa katika harambe hizi. Na ndiposa mori ama hasira ikaweza kuwajaa wale vijana wa Gen Z na wakasukuma kwamba lazima iwe sheria kwamba harambee hizi ziweze kudhibitiwa Bwana Spika. Lakini Spika nikueleze kwamba naweza endelea. Nikueleze kwamba Bwana Spika kwamba hatua ile ya kutaka kuhakikisha kwamba kuna sheria ya kudhibiti harambe Spika, nafikiri wazungu husema ni knee jerk reaction, kwamba ni magoti juu naelezewa hapa nyuma, na haitoi suluhu ya tatizo lote hili Spika. Spika, leo hii mimi ni seneta maalum, ninawakilisha vijana na natokea kaunti ya Kwale Spika. Na Spika, kila kukicha Spika, simu yangu ya rununu, simu ya mke wangu ya rununu, simu ya PA, simu ya hata wazazi wangu Spika, hupata jumbe za kwamba kuna mchango mahali Spika, kwamba kuna mgonjwa anahitaji matibabu Spika, na mimi kama kiongozi ambaye nimeteuliwa Spika, sijapigiwa hata kura Spika, hata sijataka kusema kwamba nataka kuwania nyadhifa yoyote katika kaunti yangu ya Kwale Spika, lakini kwa sababu wananchi wa Kwale na wananchi wa Kenya kwa ujumla Spika wana tabu, wana shida na wanatamani kupata msaada kutoka kwa viongozi wao Spika, unapata jumbe zile za kualika katika harambe mbalimbali, aidha kuchangia karo Spika, aidha kuchangia ujenzi. Nikueleze tu mimi mwenyewe pale eneo bunge la Kinango, mahali panaitwa kwa Kadogo, jamii pale kwa Kadogo Spika imenifuata mara nyingi sana wakiomba msaada wa kutengeneza choo cha umma Spika. Choo cha umma ambacho ni jukumu la pengine serikali ya kaunti Spika, lakini serikali ya kaunti haiwezi fanya kila kitu Spika kwa sababu ya uhaba wa fedha na mipangilio Spika. Ikiwa wananchi wetu wanahitaji choo cha umma Spika cha shilingi tu 1000 takriban 70 ama 100,000, na wamemfuata kiongozi aweze kuongoza katika shughuli ya kufanya changizo, ya kufanya harambee, ili waweze kuwezeshwa kufanya mradi ule ambao utawisaidia jamii nzima kwa ujumla, sio kwa leo wala sio kesho wala sio mtondogoo Spika, lakini kwa siku nyingi zijazo Spika. Sioni makosa pale kiongozi akifanya mchango ule Spika. Vile vile Spika, nikinaya kwamba kuona sheria hii Spika inampatia mtu binafsi ambaye ni waziri wa serikali kuu na waziri wa serikali ya kaunti nguvu kupita kiasi katika hali hii ya kudhibiti swala lote hili la harambe Spika. Spika, tusiwe jumba la kuleta sheria ambayo itatufinya sisi wenyewe kama viongozi Spika. Lazima tuketi chini, tuulizane shida ipo wapi. Ikiwa tunafanya harambee nyingi kwa sababu ya ugonjwa Spika, nafikiri serikali hii kwa sasa Spika, na imekuwa ni juhudi za serikali zilizopita hapo awamu ya kutafuta suluhu ya kuhakikisha kwamba kila Mkenya leo hii anaweza kupata matibabu bila kupitia dhiki ya kuuza mali yake, bila kupitia dhiki ya kufanya harambee zisizopungua Spika ili kupata matibabu Spika. Na nataka nishukuru serikali kwa ule mfumo wake.
What's your point of order, Senator Chiradige? Chiradige, I don't know why you are testing your card on the dispatch box.
No, Madam Speaker, it's not functional, and I wish the new commissioner was around
we would have launched a formal complaint before the new commissioner. Madam Speaker, I'm standing under order, standing order number 105 on accuracy of facts and also under Article 96 of the Constitution of Kenya. If you had the humble submissions by our brother-in-law as Nandi County, Senator Chimera, Madam Speaker, she has asserted that there are other forces who are forcing the Parliament of Kenya to do legislative interventions. Yet under the Constitution, Madam Speaker, it is our inherent right as legislators. Could he be ruled out of order for implying that we get other orders from even other people, Madam Speaker, so that even your visitors who are on the gallery might imagine that we legislate based on knee-jerk reaction, Madam Speaker? Is it in order?
Before I give you a chance to respond to that point of order, let me do a communication. Honorable Senators, I have a communication from the chair of the Visiting Community-Based Organization, CBO, from Ikolomani constituency in Kakamega County. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon of a Visiting Community-Based Organization, CBO, Shisele Tosha, from Ikolomani constituency in Kakamega County. The delegation is in the Senate on a courtesy call to Honorable Rachel Ameso Amolo, Commissioner of the Parliamentary Service Commission. In our usual tradition, Honorable Senators, of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to the delegation, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit, and I thank you. I want to give this opportunity to the Senator for Kakamega County, Dr. Senator Boni Halwale, to welcome this delegation to Senate.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam Chair, through you, allow me to welcome the young women from Kolomani and have special words to say thank you to Honorable Rachel Ameso, who is the host of this CBO. Honorable Rachel Ameso, for information, Chair, is one of our commissioners of the Parliamentary Service Commission. Madam Speaker, I'm aware that the commissioner purposes to become the woman MP of Kakamega.
Senator Abbas, is that the normal courtesy you are supposed to use when you're... Can you courtesy the speakers?
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, and I want to wish her well. Allow me also, as I welcome these great women, to congratulate the MCA of Idaho North, Mama Gladys Mugongolo. I'm sure she's in the delegation. And Madam Speaker, what a coincidence that the name Shisere is in the House today when the hospital that I have created from a dispensary to a maternity health center is by the same name, and it was started courtesy to Aharambe by Seth Lugonzo. I therefore wish to thank you for coming, and I would like that if you finish quickly, I would like to meet you behind the tent so that thank you, Mr.
Senator Boni Halwale, that language is not parliamentary. We did not understand what language you used, but we will not use more time. But you are cautioned to use parliamentary language. One understood. Point of order, Senator Wakoli. You resume your seat. Senator Wakoli.
Honorable Speaker, what my good doctor and bullfighter is saying, that we're extending an olive hand, a hand of welcome, and that we are going to do what we have always done, to guest and honorable people from our community. On behalf of Bungoma, I also welcome my mothers in the House. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Wakoli. Senator Chimera, you can proceed to clarify what you meant. on the point of order raised by Senator Cherargei.
Asante Speaker. Nafikiri Senator ndugu yangu kutoka Nandi alikuwa anazungumzia kuhusu ule mshtuko wa goti, kuashiria kwamba tunaleta sheria kwa sababu ya ile hali ya wazungu nikitohoa wanaita knee jerk reaction, Speaker. Nimemaanisha kwamba, sikumaanisha kwamba kuna msukumo kutoka sehemu mbalimbali, lakini ile hali ya kwamba vijana wetu walipiga kelele kuhusu na ile taswira yote ya masuala ya harambe, na ndipo sasa tunaona sheria hii imefika bungeni leo. Sikusema kwa kukusudia vibaya, Speaker, lakini nilikuwa naweka wazi tu kwamba kuna mchipuko wa ni hali gani ambayo sheria hii imefika bungeni leo hii, Speaker. Kunradhi, naomba kama imeeleweka niweze kuendelea na changizo yangu.
You can proceed.
Asante, Speaker. Speaker, nilikuwa nasema kwanza mimi ninafikiri hapo awali nataka kusema kwamba ninapinga vikali sana sheria hii, Speaker. Kwa sababu ukiangalia kipengele cha 13 1 na 2 kinasema kwamba mtu yoyote yule ambaye ako katika ofisi ya umma kama kiongozi haruhusiwi kujihusisha kamwe na shughuli za harambe, Speaker. Vile vile pia inasema mtu yoyote yule ambaye anapania kugombania kiti cha umma aidha cha kisiasa, Speaker, pia ndani ya takriban miaka 3 kabla ya uchaguzi mkuu haruhusiwi kufanya harambe, Speaker. Speaker, ni kinaya kwa sababu shughuli yote ya uongozi, Speaker, ni kusaidia jamii yako. Na mtu asikuelezee kwamba kwa sababu kuna hundi ya CDF ama hundi ya ngaf ama gavana ana fedha ile ambayo inamfikia kule ambayo tumepitisha leo, nafikiri bilioni takriban milioni 387, na niipongeze ile kamati ya mediation kwa kufanya hivyo. Lakini imaanishi kwamba ukiwa na pesa ile ambayo kwa mfano una jukumu la kuleta basari, Speaker, basi uweze kwenda kwa mfuko wako kibinafsi wewe mwenyewe kusaidia jamii yako. Nafikiri sio uongozi halisi, Speaker. Na vile vile pia sisi wa pwani tunasema kuna kutoa sadaka kwa Mwenyezi Mungu, Speaker. Ukitoa, Speaker, imaanishi wewe ni tajiri. Kuna msemo unasema kutoa ni moyo wala sio tajiri, Speaker. Ukichanga, Speaker, wewe umeunda sadaka yako kwa Mwenyezi Mungu, Speaker. Kwa sababu kuna maisha ya dunia na maisha ya kule ahera, Speaker. Na sioni haja kwa nini tunaweka sheria kumdhibiti kiongozi ambaye kama ndugu yangu senior wangu Mheshimiwa Mungatano, yeye yupo tayari kusaidia watu wa Tana River, Speaker. Na sisemi yeye ni tajiri. Vile vile mimi Senator Chimera nimeteuliwa, nipo tayari kusaidia watu wa Kwale katika changizo zao, Speaker. Iwe ni mchango wa harambe ya mambo ya afya, iwe ni mchango wa kujenga kanisa, na hata hii weekend inakuja nitakwenda Lunga Catholic Church, Speaker, kufanya mchango ambao wamenialika wao wenyewe, kwa sababu mimi nina imani, mimi ni Mkristo Mkatholiki. Nina imani kwamba na Biblia inasema kwamba tukija pamoja Yesu yu ndani yetu, na kwamba ni jukumu langu kama kiongozi kujenga hekalu la Mwenyezi Mungu. Pia nimealikwa vile vile katika harambe pale Guro kujenga kituo cha afya ambayo si jukumu langu, Speaker. Lakini mimi ni kiongozi, Speaker. Siwezi sema siwezi na sina ile fedha ya kufanya ule mchango, Speaker. Lakini kuna marafiki ambao wamekwenda shule, ni wafanyabiashara, Mwenyezi Mungu amewabariki na wapo na nia ya kuregesha mkono katika jamii zao. Sio sawa, Speaker, kuleta sheria ya kudhibiti mtu ambaye yuko tayari kutoa. Na nimesema kutoa ni moyo wala sio tajiri. Asante sana, Speaker, na mimi napinga vikali mswada huu. Shukran na Mungu awabariki, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Senator Eddie Okech.
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity to also try and give a few thoughts on this particular bill that has been moved by the majority leader, that essentially this bill seeks to, curb fundraising, if I might, or rather regulate fundraising, if I might put it as simple as such, Madam Speaker. I think one thing I must say, Mr. Speaker, is that the majority leader has been greatly misunderstood. I listened to the minority whip describing the intent of this bill as being able to overly deal with any kind of donations or any kind of charitable deeds especially when it comes to money. I don't think that that is what the majority leader seeks to cure here. Because I don't think that the idea of this bill is to attack, for instance, the charitable organizations that we have in this country, if you may call them also non-profit organizations. I think that what the majority leader is seeking to cure here is the problems that we have seen in this country of public leaders using the platforms of fundraising as a way of basically capturing the people and as a way of insincerely taking control of public discourse. I think that is a fundamental problem. And Madam Speaker, I think that to that extent, the majority leader is very right. Because, Madam Speaker, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which is what I think is the crust of the problem the majority seeks to solve here, Madam Speaker, Article 73, under that Chapter 6, talks about responsibility of leadership. And Madam Speaker, we have seen a lot of lack of responsibility by leadership, where the political leadership, to be specific, has been very irresponsible on issues of fundraising. Madam Speaker, one, the responsibility comes in the form of, the amounts of money that we see going to fundraising are amounts of money that cannot be explained by any means possible by the political class. This is a reality that the public is getting tired of that kind of behavior. And then number two, we are seeing a pseudo control whereby when a politician contributes in different platforms or different institutions, then they take control of that institution completely. Now, this is a reality that we must face as a country. This is why the majority leaders come with this particular bill. And that is the reason why I'm taking you back to Article 73 under Chapter 6 of the Constitution that talks about responsibility of leadership, where it says, under Sub-Article 1, that authority assigned to a state officer, A, is a public trust to be exercised in a manner that is inconsistent with the purposes and objectives of this Constitution, demonstrates respect of the people, brings honor to the nation and dignity of the office, and promotes public confidence in the integrity of the office. Madam Speaker, what has happened in this country is that people have lost public trust in public officers by being led by politicians particularly, and then politicians who are going to do arambes in different places, Madam Speaker, have also lost respect for the people, Madam Speaker. And also, the acts of arambes that we are seeing in this country, in the manner in which they are exercised, Madam Speaker, do not bring honor to the nation, and they do not bring integrity and dignity to the offices that we have. What does this mean, Madam Speaker? If you further in that article, sub-article B, it says that authority assigned to a state officer vests in the state officer the responsibility to serve the people, service, rather than the power to rule over them. The political class, because of this Arambe, are ruling over our people. They are not serving our people, Madam Speaker. So this is a problem that is a serious conversation that the majority has brought in this House that then must be addressed. Now, the question is this. Is this the right way to respond to this problem that we are facing in the country? This is what I want to appeal to the majority leader, that this is not the right way to be able to respond to this problem. Because what the majority leader is trying to do here is that is trying to legislate bad behavior. Madam Speaker, you cannot legislate bad behavior by politicians in this country to use platform of fundraising to control the people, to rule over the people, to disrespect the people, to take advantage of the people, Madam Speaker. This bill is basically indicting the EACC, Madam Speaker, because we established a constitutionally allowed institution to deal with the misbehaviors of public officers and state officers under EACC, Madam Speaker. This bill basically tells us that the EACC has completely failed in doing its work. And instead of sponsoring this bill, Madam Speaker, I want to encourage the majority leader that together we can work on rethinking the EACC in terms of the way the EACC can deal with matters of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker. Because that's where the rot is coming from. You cannot legislate fundraising in this country, Madam Speaker. Because we are people of Kenya and we come from communities, from the family to the community, to the tribe, to the county, and then to the nation, Madam Speaker. We know what fundraising goes to do, Madam Speaker. And for the purpose of this conversation, Madam Speaker, I want to enumerate them. Madam Speaker, we have got 4 fundamental areas where our people find themselves in situations that they did not wish to find themselves in, where then they are forced to fundraise for. The first one, Madam Speaker, is education. Madam Speaker, there are schools in Nyatike sub-county. There are schools in Masangora, in Kuria West sub-county. There are schools in Kuria East, Madam Speaker. There are schools in Rongo, where I come from, that kids sit under the table of their parents to be educated. And when they go to school, they sit under the tree to be educated. What is wrong when that community comes together to sit down, that in the event that the government hasn't built a school there, then they can come together as a community to build those schools, Madam Speaker? What is the problem with that? And are you telling me that today, Madam Speaker, if there are people who have come and they don't come from a family of well-being, then they cannot reach out to their neighbors who are well off in the neighborhood to come and help them build those schools? Madam Speaker, all the schools in this country have been built as a function of fundraising. We cannot kill that, Madam Speaker. On the same education, Madam Speaker, the next problem is the problem of school fee, Madam Speaker. I can assure you, Madam Speaker, that 70% of young people who have passed primary school, Madam Speaker, cannot afford to go to school, despite the fact that we have got CDF to supplement their school fee, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I take this time to share with you, and I'm not doing this for the sake of gimmicks. In the year 2005, Madam Speaker, having been adopted by a Kikuyu family in 2004 and lived with 8 families, I was meant to join Friends School Kamusinga in 2006 because I did my exams in 2005. And Madam Speaker, because I could not be able to afford school fee, remember that what we are doing now, the former President Kibaki, had tried to do it by executive power. President Kibaki had put an executive order that banned public solicitation of funds in 2004, 2003, Madam Speaker. When I passed to go to Friends School Kamusinga, Madam Speaker, I did not have money. But because the issue of fundraising had been banned by the Kibaki administration, Madam Speaker, it meant that I had to go to the DC to be able to get a form of a pro forma to raise money, Madam Speaker. For 3 months, I could not be able to get the DC to write for me a pro forma to go and solicit funds, Madam Speaker. When I eventually got the pro forma, Madam Speaker, I was only able to raise 800 shillings after 3 months, Madam Speaker. I missed my entire first semester or first term because I could not be able to raise money and I could not be able to go through getting even to the DC's office, Madam Speaker. And I had to join Friends School Kamusinga in second term when all my peers had already gone through a first term, Madam Speaker. And even then, it was through that act of having a pro forma, Madam Speaker, that I met one gentleman called Kennedy Okongo, a lawyer in town, who wrote for me the full check to go to school and be able to be a senator today in this house, Madam Speaker. Then today you are saying that for kids like me who might not have been aggressive enough to get to a DC, now have to go to a cabinet secretary or a CEC in county to get to be financed to get a fundraising document to go and raise money. Where are we going as a country, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, number 2, the area that people are facing a lot of problems in is medical issues, Madam Speaker. It might look simple for people here who have got medical cover to think that medical issues in this country are easy. But Madam Speaker, we have got people in this country who are held as prisoners of hospitals because they cannot be able to pay 30,000 shillings to get out of an hospital, Madam Speaker. So the moment you say that for them to be able to raise money, to leave hospitals, to raise money, to go and get medical attention, Madam Speaker, then they must look for the CEC. They must form a committee. They must look for people who are well off. Madam Speaker, what are we doing to our country? Let us legislate for not the bad manners of politicians. Let EACC do their job, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also have another area here that people just don't understand. The burden of funerals in this country, Madam Speaker. That's another area that me as a political class have faced a lot of requests on, where somebody has suffered and died in a hospital. Then they get imprisoned in mortuary, yet they're dead, because their own families cannot be able to afford a fee of 30,000, 10,000 shillings, sometimes as little as 5,000 shillings, Madam Speaker. A family cannot be able to get their person out of a mortuary. What is wrong with that person reaching out to a neighbor or to me, who might be a little bit privileged, to help out and to lend a hand to get this person out of a mortuary, Madam Speaker? These are real issues. They're not stories. They are in our communities, Madam Speaker. Now, I know that the bone of contention that has been there is the issue of church and mosques, Madam Speaker, where the political class have been able to use pulpits and places of mosque to do political campaigns and make it difficult to make sense for nourishment of our people in terms of spirituality, Madam Speaker. Again, I do not support the idea that we can ban fundraising for churches, that we can ban fundraising for mosques, Madam Speaker, because the role that mosques and churches play in terms of moral compass of our community, Madam Speaker, the value might not be quantifiable, but indeed it's untold in terms of the impact they're having on our community. I think that, Madam Speaker, let the churches self-regulate in terms of controlling the bad manners of some few politicians. And it's not all of them, Madam Speaker. It's some few politicians who have got bad manners of using this platform as a place of bravado and ego setting in terms of their political nourishment instead of their spiritual nourishment, Madam Speaker. But we cannot ban the political class, the public officer, the state officer, the private individual, the corporate individual from raising money to grow churches, to grow mosques, and to grow houses of worship, when these places are actually helping to contribute in supplementing the government's effort in terms of building our moral capacity in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if you want to build a strong home, you must constantly build three things in a human being. That is why, even in creation, there is Holy Trinity. That's why even in creation, we are created in threes, Madam Speaker. The first thing you must feed in a human being, Madam Speaker, is the mind of a human being. That's why you have got education system. But once you fed the mind of a human being, Madam Speaker, there is still no peace if you do not feed the heart of a human being, Madam Speaker. And that is where the churches and the mosques are coming from, Madam Speaker. But a peaceful heart with an educated mind is never peaceful unless you also feed the stomach of this human being, Madam Speaker. That's when you have got a complete human being, Madam Speaker. So any moment you take away any of those segments in the society, you can't make it. We as a government and as a political class can only feed the stomach. Education institutions can only feed the brain. Where do we leave the hearts of our people? It is to the churches and the mosque, and we cannot allow for any law that makes it impossible to build those churches and to build those mosques, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in this bill, we have also seen a provision, very fast, Madam Speaker, that says if you want to do fundraising, then you must do it in your family. So what happens to a family where, I come from a family where the first name that has been heard about in this country, Madam Speaker, in our family, in our entire generation, that Arun Cheriot knows, is Eddie Okech. Because my grandfather, Kawisa, died long time ago in some village in Nyakune, near Gogo Falls, that nobody knows, meaning it has got an impact on the well-being of my entire community and my entire families. So you are letting me be in a situation where if you want to do for fundraising, I can only do it with my family and not with the family of Mungatana, who I now know, who I can invite and tell him, support me here and there. Madam Speaker, this is now discriminating and then making people to be in their own cocoons of successful families, the haves versus have-nots. We cannot allow that in our country, Madam Speaker. And lastly, Madam Speaker, there is the issue of the regulators. You are talking about regulations being done by Cabinet Secretary. Madam Speaker, in law, it looks easy. But in practice, how will this Cabinet Secretary regulate the President in terms of
making sure that the president abides by the requirements of this law. It's not possible. The president cannot be regulated by the person that he is the supervisor and the boss of. Madam Speaker, at the county level, you are saying in this bill that the CEC, in charge of planning and social development, will regulate fundraising. How will this person regulate the governor, where our governors have got so much ego that you cannot even tell them something in a funeral or in a function? It will mean that some political class will have more powers to even take advantage of fundraising further than some political class that don't have power. Yeah? So it will be a business for the higher political class to actually do what they want with this fundraising thing and leave those people who are smaller to be, in fact, you are giving the most powerful political people a tool to harass their opponents and other people with this bill, Madam Speaker. This is a good and a well-intended bill to cure the problems of our leadership under Article 17 of the Constitution, but it is not a solution. It is legislating a behavior of bad politics, bad manners of politicians that cannot be cured by this bill. Let us sit as a house and come up with a legislation that will help us rethink the entire EACC and make sure that EACC can do its job or disband it and come with a more functional anti-corruption institution that can deal with corrupt leaders. With that, Madam Speaker, I reject this bill in the entirety. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Eddie. Senator Abbas Sheikh Mohammed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to also join my colleagues that this bill will not help any Kenyan. As you are aware, the spirit of Harambee has been the fundamental cornerstone for this country in terms of development. It's only after CDF and the other funds came in and the country economy improved that people want to change the spirit of brotherhood. The Harambees or fundraisings have created cohesion in this country. That most of the poor people have really come up. Most of the students that today, most of our professionals went for scholarships outside the country through Harambees. It created, fundraisings and Harambees have created love among the communities. It's only through sharing with the poor that we love one another. Honorable Speaker, we cannot today throw away the brotherhood that Harambees have created. As you are aware, this country, almost 70% is below the poverty line. And they cannot even afford 2 meals in a day. They cannot afford to pay school fees. Initially, the government said there's free education, but we're not seeing any free education here today. You are seeing even the primary kids have been told go and bring money. Mothers cannot even afford. They even sell chickens and all these things. Honorable Speaker, I've started working with this government way back in the 80s. And by the time I was starting job, the Harambee was actually at the peak. Because there was no school infrastructures. Kids were learning in the school and under the trees. At times, the chiefs were being used to go and collect animals or money from within the villages. Of course, sometimes they were using excessive force. There was a bit of corruption. But today, the classroom that I went to, in my class 1, actually was built with Harambee. And therefore, I cannot be able to support today to say that Harambee should be stopped or should be monitored. That cannot work for us. Honorable Speaker, through fundraisings, actually many Kenyans have sought medical treatment outside this country. Medical conditions of these days, there's so many people who are sick. The medical services, hospitals actually have so much been commercialized. That somebody stays in an ICU or HDU in 1 night or 2 nights and 3 nights, the cost becomes just unbelievable high. It is through Harambees that we're able to save people, the dead bodies, from mortuaries because they've been held custody until money is paid back. Honorable Speaker, I will agree that I will say that the corrupt are not the poor people. The corruption comes from the highest echelons. The top guys who are stealing money. The people who have the money. These 80% or 90% of Kenyans cannot even access money. They survive on only harambes and goodwills of their friends and the next of kins. So if anybody wants to stop corruption through stopping harambe, I think that's very wrong. What I will say is that those who steal pay more and more harambe so that this money can come back to the public. If you say there's no harambe, then those who stole, the corrupt people will keep the money in the banks or even overseas. So I think we will encourage more harambes. If you will ask me, that we will say so that at least the little they pay back, I think can be able to help the people that they have stolen their money. Honorable Speakers, I think what we are talking about here is kind of pretense, because I was hearing some of my colleagues here talking that Harambe will do this, Harambe is going to create corruption. My friend, corruption is not coming from the grassroots, it comes from the high top, and top and to down. Harambe, we know that it is actually starting from the office institutions. So, Honorable Speaker, I think Harambes shall not be controlled. Harambes cannot, if you want somebody to stop corruption, let this House produce, or let's institute a bill that will seriously deal with corrupt people. Like the China, even if it's going to be killing somebody, even if you're going to jail somebody 100 years, so that somebody can be able to face the consequences of his stealing. But Islamic Harambes, just because somebody has stolen and they want to clean his money, will not help with stopping corruption. With those few remarks, I beg to support. I want to oppose the bill.
Thank you, Senator Abbas. Senator William Kipkemoi Kisang.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe the intent of the bill originally was not bad, because we had issues in June, and because of the conversation we had the State of the Nation debate, this is bill is as a result of what happened that time, Honorable Speaker. And I want to report to you, Madam Speaker, that some of us went to school because of Harambes. If you get somebody who is 45 years and above, who is in this house, or outside there, Madam Speaker, most schools at that time, there used to be two types of schools. There was schools done by government, and there were some Harambee secondary schools. Most of our public schools now in the rural setup, Madam Speaker, were called Harambee secondary schools. And those Harambee secondary schools, Madam Speaker, some of them even now are national schools, were built by the community, they were built through Harambee, Madam Speaker, by our parents, selling cows, some selling busi, others selling sheep, and all types of things, Madam Speaker, to ensure that the schools are built. Madam Speaker, I hope with the debate that's going on, the little majority is going to think about this bill, Madam Speaker, because we cannot do as a country without an Harambee, Madam Speaker. Most of our judges also, Madam Speaker, were built through Harambee. Some were done by missionaries who came to the country early, maybe 60s, 50s, and 70s, Madam Speaker. And these missionaries also, the resources they got was as a result of Harambes in their own country, Madam Speaker, because they got maybe charity organizations, and those who are philanthropic enough to contribute. And then the resources came to Kenya, came to Africa, and our churches, our mosques were built as a result of Harambee, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my colleagues have talked about school fees. Most people went to school because of Harambee. I remember when I was going to Form 1, I almost missed going to Form 1, Madam Speaker, because my parents didn't have anything. But because of the community, they sat. This is a young man who did, a young boy who did very well, top of his school, and then they decided to contribute. And that time, our school fees was the 1,540, Madam Speaker, and it was not easy to get 1,500 in 1982. So if it was not easy to get 1,500, how about now, when those joining Form 1, they're expected to pay 50,000, 60,000. So, Madam Speaker, basically what I'm saying is, As a leader, as a legislator, Madam Speaker, we are not going to agree to legislate Harambes in our country, Madam Speaker, because many people will be locked out of school, they'll be locked out of colleges, Madam Speaker. CDF has been there from 2004, but it's not been able to, sponsor all the students across the country. That is why one of the senators the other day, Madam Speaker, said, can we collapse all these bursaries from CDF, bursary from county government, bursary by women reps, and from the ministry, we put in one gitty so that we have really free education from ECD up to university. The only way we can agree, Madam Speaker, to regulate fundraising is if we say completely now from nursery to university education is completely free, Madam Speaker, so that we know those from less fortunate, less privileged families, Madam Speaker, can have education, which is an equalizer, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the state of health in the country, Madam Speaker, you know, in the village, most of our dispensaries, most of our health centers, Madam Speaker, there is no medicine. And because there's no medicine, you'll realize most of our people who get sick will go to private hospitals in the counties. And when they go even to public, they're expected to pay. And when they're expected to pay and they don't have anything, many of them have lost even their pieces of land because of selling to take their kinsmen and women, Madam Speaker, to the hospital. So basically what I'm saying, because of medical expenses, Madam Speaker, we'll support Harambes. Because of education, Madam Speaker, we'll support Harambes, Madam Speaker. And because of other issues, Madam Speaker, if you check clause 14, clause 13, Madam Speaker, of the bill, clause 14, Madam Speaker, it says a person shall not conduct a public fundraising appeal unless the person has applied for and obtained a permit in accordance with the provisions of this law, Madam Speaker. You can imagine you have a sick person, the person requires to be discharged because he has gone to the hospital, you need to apply within 14 days. And where will you get this CEC? If we were not able to get a DC who was just within the district, but now this is a CC in charge of a county or a CS in charge of the country, Madam Speaker, it's not possible. And Madam Speaker, one of the clauses here, Madam Speaker, is saying, if you intend to seek for a public office, 3 years before elections, you should not conduct any fundraising, Madam Speaker. How would you know? You know, standing for a seat sometimes is a calling. The community can approach you to stand, and they can approach you 6 months to the election. What will happen if you will have conducted a fundraiser before? It means basically you'll be locked out, and the community will lose a leader who would have come to assist the people, Madam Speaker. You check the fines, Madam Speaker, that if you conduct a fundraiser without a valid permit, Madam Speaker, you can pay a fine of 5 million. How will you pay a fine of 5 million when basically you are looking for resources to release somebody from the hospital or to take a child to the hospital, to school, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, basically what I'm saying is when the time comes to vote, Madam Speaker, we are going to reject this bill, and so that we can basically ensure that we continue supporting our people. This is a social call, it's a social rally to ensure that our people are assisted, Madam Speaker. With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I oppose this particular bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kisang. I do not see any other senator, and so I'll call upon the mover to reply. Majority Leader, Senator Aaron.
Few days that this bill has been on the floor of the House, listening to colleague senators speak about a very live topic in our country presently. You will recall what has happened the last weekend, Madam Speaker, where for the very first time we are told the Most Reverend Philip Anyolo, though from quarters close to the conversation, I'm told, I've seen the governor of Nairobi saying he's still awaiting his donation back. I saw him say somewhere that when he inquired, because they had said they have returned the donations, he was told that the fundi had already cut the material for the choir, because the donation was for uniform for the choir. Madam Speaker, so these are the challenges. So these are very live conversation even in the country. And I shared yesterday something on my Twitter page. And of course, the know-it-alls that live on that space, Mr. Speaker, because they never accept to be corrected for anything, did not believe what I said. Today, this afternoon, I have tabled the report from the Labor and Social Issues, Social Affairs Committee, where I stated that over 90% of the respondents that sent in memoranda with regards to this bill actually opposed the bill, Madam Speaker. Just like many colleagues here, a good number have opposed. It's almost split evenly in the House. There's those in support of the bill and those that oppose the bill in principle. And I said that we live in an interesting country, Madam Speaker, because if you follow the conversation online, it's like there are two Kenyas. That's what I've realized. There's a Kenyan online, and there is a Kenya, the Republic, where you and I come from the villages, where Senator Mungatana, Senator Elomonen comes from. There are certain conversations which, if you follow in the Twitter and Facebook space, the kind of things that I said there, most of the time, Madam Speaker, don't exist or are not practical in the real world of the villages and the people that we represent in this House. Because for every village that I have visited the last few months since this conversation began, many pastors that have spoken to me, I gave the example of AIC Ziwani, where I was 2 weeks ago. I was somewhere in Kipkelion West, in my own county of Kericho this week. And the pastors continue to tell me, please, Majority Leader, you have a very bad bill that you want to stop Harambes. Like many of the colleagues that have spoken this afternoon, they are entirely, first of all, misinformed. So there are two issues. Number one, there is misinformation generally, because this bill does not ban Harambes. It only stops you and I, public and state officers, Madam Speaker, from presiding over. Otherwise, Harambes are permitted, Mr. Speaker. But second and most importantly, unlike the statements that I see from churches here, I saw from Jackson Olesapit, I saw from the Catholic bishops, telling us that we need to put, that the church actually wants to put a stop on this. But it's not what preachers tell us in the villages where we come from, including in parishes of the Catholic Church. In my own office, even as I hear what is being said by the Catholic bishops here in Nairobi, in my own office in the village, Madam Speaker, or in our counties, many of these members will tell you that they have cards of pending Harambee invitations from the same churches, including Catholic and Anglican. That's why I said it's like there are two worlds in this country. Some space in the air called online, where you're chasing things that are unseen and people compete for attention and applause. Then the real world in the villages where we come from, where people tell us different things. Therefore, as a legislator, Madam Speaker, sometimes it is difficult to know which world to react to, Madam Speaker. Because the kind of instructions and the things that I see being said in the online space, Madam Speaker, and the information, I want to believe that the reason Senator Mungatana spoke the way he spoke about this particular bill, perhaps that is a brief that he has from the people he represented in this House, the men and women from Tana River who voted for him. And they are saying, Senator, this is what we expect. But I'm sure you are also bombarded by messages and Twitter conversations, or people telling you, stop this. We don't want it to exist. So, Madam Speaker, our work as legislators is increasingly becoming difficult. If you are not careful as a legislator, and I warned colleagues of ours sometimes back here, that you can easily chase air in the names of TikTok likes and followership online and miss the real conversation sometimes that happen back in the villages. Because at the end of the day, a legislator is a representative of the people, and you must find ways in which you capture the views of the people on whose behalf you vote in this House, Madam Speaker. And that includes those that are in the online space and those that are offline, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I have listened to the comments of colleagues about this bill, very interesting. Some proposing a total rejection, some proposing, like Senator Ledama, that don't just ban Harambes, look also into charitable organizations that run 1 or 2 charity activities in the country to ensure that they do this in strict compliance with our laws, Madam Speaker, that you ensure that in the contributions that they receive from donors abroad, Madam Speaker, the same is actually shared for the intended purpose of those who are making those donations. To those, Madam Speaker, that agree that we need to stop members of the public and state officers, Madam Speaker, from participating in fundraisers for the sole reason that it is one of the avenues through which we can demonetize our politics and reduce the influence of money in our politics, which, like the good Bible says, Madam Speaker, money is the root, actually, to evil. And many times when money is not prudently used, Madam Speaker, it can be used for bad things in our society. Therefore, Madam Speaker, my proposal will be that in such a time as this, where you have a report of the bill, you have members who have a divided opinion, before eventually putting this to a vote, it will be good to consult further and listen if, Madam Speaker, whether there is a way that the bill can be enriched, Madam Speaker, or do we lose the overall intention? Because there are those that have taken issue, for example, with the fact that you are proposing committees through which you can not per se regulate, but a reporting mechanism where the CEC in our counties and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Madam Speaker, can receive reports of some of these public fundraising appeals, Madam Speaker. And this is important, Senator Mungatana. I wouldn't wish that we lose that even in this conversation. Because how many times have you been invited to fundraisings where months later, if you try to go and check whether that money was actually used for the intended purpose, you cannot establish whether that happened or not. And therefore, there was a proposal. Maybe the mechanism that has been proposed needs to be refined. It is at this time that many people are beginning to speak on this topic and say, give us more time to make our contribution. Maybe, with leave of your office, Madam Speaker, it will be an opportune time to provide additional time for people to either think through and share their amendments before eventually taking a vote on this bill, Madam Speaker, including calling for submissions from members of the public. I said this yesterday on my tweet, and this is the accurate information. The report that is before the House bears me witness that there is no religious organization that sent in a memorandum on this bill. And that is quite curious, because I see people speaking very strongly. I expected to see the Catholic Church, I expected to see the Anglican, at least the two of them that have spoken publicly in support of this bill, Madam Speaker, to send in memorandum in support, Madam Speaker. There are also others that have spoken in opposition to the bill. At least it will have enriched our work as legislators, Madam Speaker, to benefit from their perspective, Madam Speaker. Therefore, this is an interesting conversation that the country needs to have with itself before the conclusion and the final determination of what to do with this particular bill, Madam Speaker. And therefore, as Majority Leader, I will be writing to the Speaker, seeking for additional time for first, consideration of additional views, and second and most importantly, to give legislators time to reflect and perhaps seek more opinion from your own people. Senator Mungatana, it will be good for you to ask the people in Tana River, including the young people that perhaps at the time where this conversation began, let's not lose track of history. This conversation began at the height of the so-called Gen Z protests, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure there were young people in Tana River who spoke and said, yeah, we don't want politicians in our churches, we don't want to see them make donations, and so on and so forth. It will be important to listen to them over this weekend, especially as they speak in a large gathering at your village back in Garsen, Mr. Speaker, so that they speak, Madam Speaker, sorry, so that they speak and instruct you in the presence of the rest of the voters, and they can hear what the feedback from the rest of the voters will be before you eventually cast your vote, Madam Speaker. Because at the end of it, Madam Speaker, this conversation is about trying to reduce the influence of money in our politics, Madam Speaker. And let's not pretend here. Harambes form part and parcel of our body politic, and the kind of contributions that people make eventually has an influence in the determination, Madam Speaker, of whether to vote for a candidate or not. It may not be the only determinant, but many of the times, Madam Speaker, it has been used as a yardstick to gauge your abilities and your prowess, Madam Speaker, in terms of marshalling resources, and people use it even as a determinant. Madam Speaker, if you are not careful, and if you do not put a check on this space of fundraisers, Madam Speaker, in another 2 or 3 cycles of Parliament, you will have these houses filled up with wash-wash characters, Madam Speaker, because increasingly it is becoming difficult, Madam Speaker, even to campaign on issues. How many times do these members of this House go out to campaign, Madam Speaker, and before you address a gathering, people don't want to listen. They tell you, we've had those stories before. They're already queuing and saying, just finish with us. We know what we'll do at the ballot, Madam Speaker. Therefore, we will have to be intentional. And it's not just by way of fundraisers, Madam Speaker. It includes the overall influence of money as a mobilizing tool, as a determining factor in who gets elected into Parliament and positions of leadership, Madam Speaker. We have campaign financing laws, but how effective are they, Madam Speaker? You remember when you were running for last election, we were supposed by law, Senator Mungatana, to open an account, through which you channel your public, your campaign finances, and manage it, then file returns to IBC. How many politicians observed that, Madam Speaker? So until there's intention on us as a legislature, Madam Speaker, to show that we are going out of our way to reduce the influence of money in our politics, then it will be difficult, Madam Speaker, for us to fight corruption. The biggest evil that our society continues to hoggle and fight about, Madam Speaker. And this is not just about us as a political class. In fact, many of the beneficiaries of corrupt practices, though people imagine that it is we in the political class, it is actually those that are in public offices that are not necessarily political appointees, Madam Speaker. They are the ones who run tenders, Madam Speaker. They are the ones who do many of these so-called government projects. Perhaps what eventually gets to the political class is a fraction, and a very small fraction, as compared to what remains with the rest of. Take time to reflect before eventually taking a vote on this issue. I have noted and I have said that there are members who have raised serious concerns about how to address certain issues. I will be notifying the Speaker. Luckily, I have Standing Order number 66.3 that allows the request for putting of a question until a later date. In the intervening period, Madam Speaker, we could take that opportunity to either consult further and make listening to more memorandum from members of the public with regards to this particular bill. I will inform the Speaker of this request by way of a letter so that perhaps we can make an eventual decision actually on this particular issue. With those many remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to reply and request that in accordance to Standing Order number 66.3, we defer the putting of a question until a later date when all these other things that I mentioned have happened. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Majority Leader. That request is granted. We defer the putting of the question, and you can dispatch that communication to the Speaker's office on the request to receive more memorandum and views on this bill. I will now reorganize the order paper and call out and request the clerk to call out order number 16.
Order number 16, the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, second reading.
Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2024, be now read a second time. This is an important bill, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to appreciate what this Senate has done the last few weeks, especially with regards to our brothers and sisters that serve in our constituent assemblies in the counties. You remember, Madam Speaker, that we have already passed legislation in this House that grants financial autonomy to our county assemblies, and that bill is presently on its way to the National Assembly for consideration. One of the biggest requests and asks that actually the county assemblies have made to this House as an elder brother in the devolution family, to ensure that we grant them the freedom with which they do, Madam Speaker, their responsibilities. Second, and most importantly, Madam Speaker, is looking generally into the welfare of members of county assembly. Madam Speaker, you know at the beginning of this term, the kind of conversation that we had about salaries of members of county assembly, where SRC, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, drastically reduce remuneration for members of our county assembly and put it at a figure that perhaps shocked the country, especially those that know what service in public offices, especially elected officials, have to go through. And it left many of our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, in very difficult financial situations. And you know, Madam Speaker, I don't know whether that has contributed to the many wrangles that you continue to see in our county assemblies with the executive. In fact, in my 3 terms of being a senator, Madam Speaker, I have never seen a time where there is extreme wrangles between county assemblies and the executive as this particular time, Madam Speaker. And there are many reasons. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. But I highly suspect that the fact that the welfare of members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, hasn't been sufficiently addressed since the onset of devolution, Madam Speaker, has a thing or two to do with it. You know, members of a county assembly look at those that serve in the first term, Madam Speaker. If you find that your predecessor MCA who served before you, when salaries were better and there were more consistent flow of money to our county governments, Madam Speaker, ever since they left office, are living in raw, abject poverty, Madam Speaker, chances are, during your time of service, you will also be planning, because every politician lives with the practical reality of knowing that one day there will be a former something. It may be at the next election, the next or the subsequent one, they may survive it, but one day, one time, they will cease holding the power and the influence of public office, Madam Speaker, and therefore they need to be assured of their future, especially knowing the very fact that in this country, once you have served as an elected official, it's extremely difficult for you to secure employment elsewhere. Very few people will trust you. If you appear before an interview panel and you say, oh, I was a member of parliament previously, chances are very high that they will actually reject your request for employment, Madam Speaker. Then this passes and holds true from MCA all the way to members of parliament. Therefore, Madam Speaker, it is not a waste of valuable legislative time to be processing this bill with regards to pension, actually, of our members of county assemblies, Madam Speaker. The principal object of this bill actually is to establish the county assemblies pension scheme, which is for all members of our county assemblies, and to provide for establishment of the scheme's board of trustees and provide for the scheme's management and administration. The bill proposes to have the scheme offer lump sum payments as provident, periodic payments as pension and income drawdowns. The proposed scheme will transition all members of a county assembly into one universal scheme for all 47 county governments, besides being open to other public officers and any other person that may be approved by this particular board. Madam Speaker, eventually when the devolution committee return their verdict on this particular bill, because earlier on I asked Senator Abbas, who's the chairperson of this committee, and I've had opportunity to listen to County Assemblies Forum, Madam Speaker, who shared their views and input on this particular bill. It will actually be important to note what their contributions will have been, how they intend the bill to be improved, but this is a basis upon which we are beginning this conversation on the need to ensure that members of our county assemblies, just like we that serve in the national legislature, have some form of pension, Madam Speaker. And let it be known, because I know how the Kenyan media operates, I would not be shocked if tomorrow morning I wake up to a screaming headline that says, oh, Majority Leader moves a bill to give pension to members of a county assembly. Then people will begin the usual conversation that is most of the time misinformed in our public spaces, Madam Speaker. This is not about raiding the public coffers. It is about setting up a pension scheme that perhaps, and just like ours, Madam Speaker, will be contributory. We deducted monies actually during our time of service here in this house, Madam Speaker, and eventually when you retire and you get to the proper age, Madam Speaker, you earn pension depending on how much you've contributed over the years. And that's why the members that have served longer, Madam Speaker, enjoy more resources, because it is actually a contributory scheme and not a raid on the public coffers, Madam Speaker, as many would imagine. The establishment of this scheme is paramount, as it will provide financial security, Madam Speaker, for members of the county assembly upon retiring, and ensuring that they transition out of service with dignity and stability. I've explained, Madam Speaker, how we undermine devolution by having people serve in offices where they know that my only usefulness to this society is when I'm in office. And therefore, sometimes, even in their decision-making, the fact that you have no guaranteed security in the future, people tend to make decisions that are short-sighted because they have no absolute plan, but plan for the future. But if you are certain, Madam Speaker, that there is already a scheme set out for you, Madam Speaker, where in future, once you retire or once you exit, Madam Speaker, from that particular office, Madam Speaker, there is a decent salary that can keep you going. How many times do you meet former members of county assembly, Madam Speaker, who struggle even with basic things as basic as school fees and even food to eat? Madam Speaker, my phone is full of messages from people that I know from across the country who previously served as either councillors or members of a county assembly. They gave service to this country, Madam Speaker, but we haven't organized ourselves in a way that you equally enjoy pension once your days here are done or in public service. Without a pension scheme, members and staff of our county assemblies face challenges in meeting their needs, leading to financial vulnerability. Therefore, this bill actually establishes the county assembly pension scheme, which will cushion members of our county assemblies from financial strain post-retirement. For this reason, the importance of this bill, Madam Speaker, can never be gainsaid. There are various parts of the bill, Part 1 to Part 5. Part 1 of the bill, which compromises Clause 1 to 5, contains the preliminary matters, which is a title, interpretation of terms, applicable clauses, Madam Speaker, and institution, organization, or state officer who shall join, and the scope of the bill, which is to the extent and range of those who may access services of this particular scheme. Part 2 of the bill, Madam Speaker, it comprises Clause 6 to 21, which provides for establishment of the scheme. It establishes the County Retirement Scheme Fund and its Board of Trustees, which provides the procedure for appointment of the trustees and the necessary qualifications. We don't want anybody, Madam Speaker, just any person that has the opportunity to arise and claim, Madam Speaker, that they should be allowed the chance to run these schemes. We need people that are qualified. So it provides that the trustees function and the powers and set the tenures to 3 years, renewable once, based on their performance, Madam Speaker. Part 3 of the bill, it comprises Clause 22 to 37, contains the provisions on the administration of the scheme and provide for the appointment of the fund managers and the custodian. It also sets out their function. The functions of the administrator, who is the CEO, are also set out. Further, the part provides for membership of the scheme without a sponsor, thus vesting of benefits and withdrawal from the retirement savings account and retirement from the service, among others. It sets out the prohibited payments from the scheme, the usual statutory requirements of any pension scheme for those that follow how pension schemes operate. Madam Speaker, this is nothing new. Part 4 of the bill, which is clause 38 to 44, Madam Speaker, it provides for establishment of and management of the County Assembly's Pension Scheme Fund, which contains financial provision. It provides for how surplus funds may be invested, as well as set out the requirements for the board to have a reserve account. Madam Speaker, a basic provision to ensure that for whatever reason, when members call upon the opportunity to draw from these funds, Madam Speaker, they have something that secures their future. You know, it's important, Madam Speaker, to ensure that our members of County Assembly actually, just like the rest of all of us that work in one place or the other, have financial stability upon their retirement. You know, Madam Speaker, it is not, oh, sorry, Mr. Speaker, I have noted the change. I was pretty much surprised addressing Madam Speaker only to notice she was behind me walking by. Mr. Speaker, it is assumed what is a contribution to poverty, Madam Speaker, where when they say poverty is a vicious cycle, Mr. Speaker, how many times actually people contribute to their own poverty by ensuring that they don't join any sort of a pension scheme, and eventually upon their retirement, they have to rely on members of the public or members of their family to sustain their life. And this should be actually the way. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can get to a point where all public servants, and not just us members of parliament, actually make contributions away from the national scheme of the NSSF. I know every employed adult in the Republic contribute to the National Social Security Fund, Mr. Speaker, but over and above, there are many other pension schemes that people contribute to and hope that in their retirement in future they can draw from. It's my hope, Mr. Speaker, that eventually we can have all our public servants actually have a fund set out for them, so that you don't have to go through what public servants go through, like police and teachers, by queuing at Bima House, Madam Speaker, for you to get your file approved. And most of the time, this is money that has been deducted from them. That I know we have combined that particular space with the setup of the, I think, public servant super, there's something, a very big, some institution has a very big confusing name thereabout, but I don't know how practical it is. That's not what we are proposing for the MCAs. This is just one purely for members of our county assembly. Part 5 of the bill, which is clause 45 to 53, it sets out the general provisions, including the duty of care of the board, protection of trustees and employees of the scheme from personal liabilities, offences, penalty clauses, the usual conversations about how to manage a scheme and how they conduct their business. So I wish to state that this is a very important bill, and I urge members of the Senate to support, Mr. Speaker, so that our brothers and sisters in our county assemblies, Madam Speaker, can have a more reliable pension scheme system, and upon their retirement from public office, Mr. Speaker, they live decent life like they lived during the days as they toiled and served members of the public. With those very many remarks, I beg to move and request the Senator for Tana River, Senator Danson Buya Mungatana, to second this bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mungatana. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the floor of the House. Mr. Speaker, I want to really thank the Honorable Heriot, our majority leader, for moving this bill in a very eloquent way and expressing how important this bill is. Mr. Speaker, I think I'm one of the older members in this House. And Mr. Speaker, part of my political journey, I served the Republic of Kenya as elected member of Garsen. And Mr. Speaker, thereafter, I was out of office because I stood unsuccessfully twice for the position of governor of Tana River County, and later on, I came back to this house. The people of Tana River brought me to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I can speak with authority what it means to be in office and what it means to be out of office. I'm not telling stories, Mr. Speaker. I'm telling you the truth that from my personal experience, if it wasn't for the fact that, Mr. Speaker, I had run a law firm, that law firm was the one that sustained me, Mr. Speaker, for 10 years and continues to do so to date. Mr. Speaker, there are colleagues we served with in that parliament. And when they left, like Majority Leader said, they could not find employment. And Mr. Speaker, what is provided for, even in our scheme as senators and members of parliament, is if you have served for 2 terms consecutively. So if you haven't, and you did only 1 term, you have a problem. And if you have, but also you didn't make much contribution, you have a problem. And if you have, but you don't have another source of income, you have a problem. So, Mr. Speaker, what I'm talking about is real. We need to support members of county assembly who serve and they finish their term and are not re-elected by the people back to office. Mr. Speaker, it is real that when you are out of office, you face the reality that you cannot be employed. You have to have your own self-employment. You have to have your own business. And Mr. Speaker, a lot of our members of county assembly, they finish their term, they are not re-elected back, and they do not have businesses, Mr. Speaker. They do not have professional training. They are not engineers, they are not lawyers, they are not doctors. So they don't have something to fall back to in terms of their sustainable income. So, Mr. Speaker, it has been a problem. Back in Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, old members of the County Assembly of Tana River County, old members of the former Tana River County Council, when you meet them, Mr. Speaker, you feel bad because you want to help, but you can only do so much. Mr. Speaker, this bill is critical. This bill must be supported by the people of Kenya and by the Senate. Mr. Speaker, why I say so? People who have given service to this nation, people who have taken their time, some even left their careers to come and offer service to the people who elected them. And then after that, you find difficulties in going back to your career. And it's practical, and I keep going back to this, that after having served 10 years as a member of parliament, you go back to your practice and you find your old clients have moved on. Because when you took up public office, you didn't have time to give them all the attention they required. So they have moved on to other practitioners of the law. And if you're an engineer or you're a consultant in a certain field, say economics, if you left the House of Parliament, National Assembly, County Assembly, or the Senate, and you go back, you will find your clients have left. So, Mr. Speaker, it is like beginning afresh. You will find you are competing with much younger people who have gone into the field. So there is need for us to plan ahead for our members of the county assembly. There is need for us to give them dignity when they retire from active politics or when they lose their position as members of county assembly. Mr. Speaker, for members of parliament, we have done something, and many members of county assembly have asked this question. What about us? And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is a good law that we have brought before this House, that people will now know that when they are in these positions, they'll be saving some money, and when they retire, that money is deducted from their salaries, and when they retire, that money becomes available for them for purposes of their existence, even as they supplement whatever other business they do. Mr. Speaker, this is critical because our retired councillors, Mr. Speaker, many of them, and I know of one particular one, who had a home, who was married, when the term got finished, he stayed with his wife. Financial difficulties came, they separated, he could not manage his family affairs anymore. And Mr. Speaker, even the house that he had built, he had to sell it to somebody else. This man, Mr. Speaker, started living at the mercy of brothers and sisters who will use, at some point, look upon him as their leader. So, Mr. Speaker, we need this kind of planning for our members of county assembly. We do not want them to be in the position that the former councillors have been subjected to. We do not want them to be in a position like former members of parliament before we had our Provident scheme that have also been subjected to. Mr. Speaker, serving the public is serving the public. Whether you are a member of the county assembly, you are a member of the National Assembly, or you are a member of the Senate, or even you are elected as governor, or you are elected as a president. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the law that we formulated for presidents and former presidents, you would see that a president who is a retired president continues to draw 75% of the salary that he used to earn when in active service. So whichever way you look at it, that man or woman would be entitled to a decent life when they retire. When you come to members of county assembly, Mr. Speaker, that has not been looked at all. When you come to members of the National Assembly and the Senate, Mr. Speaker, the amounts are not comparable to what the presidents, former presidents are getting. So, Mr. Speaker, because all these categories of public servants are doing the same work, they are serving the public, it is good for them to have a decent retirement package. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the formulation of this law, you would see that they have created the trustees who are supposed to manage all the 47 counties. The money is going to be in one place, and trustees are going to be chosen. The qualifications have been given, good qualifications. But, Mr. Speaker, in this country, we've had problems and problems and problems when it comes to funds. Anything you see written a fund, CDF, Constituency Development Fund, when you hear lab trust, fund, when you hear anything that is ending up with one word called fund, Mr. Speaker, there are problems. There are problems because the structures of our laws seem to be copy and paste. New ideas are not being put to create checks and balances. Mr. Speaker, even in SACCOs, you will see the same problem. When you hear something SACCO, unless there is good management there, you have a problem. In fact, there are some people who think that once a SACCO is established, they will try to get into management so that they can misappropriate funds. They will try to get into a cooperative so that they can misappropriate funds. They will try even to get into this so that they can misappropriate these funds from MCS. So I would want MCS who are all listening to me and the umbrella organization for members of county assembly. This law is available for you to study and look at. We would want to hear, when we go into public participation, we want to hear a lot from all the 47 counties. How do we tighten the bolts and nuts? How do we make it impossible for someone with ill intention from getting money from your fund? How do we manage this asset that we are creating? Because all of you are going to be deducted and this money is going to be in one place. The temptation for the devil is going to be high because the money will be a lot. And the truth of the matter is, if this law is not tightened, if this law is going to be like other laws, then we are going into a very, very rough ride. You have seen a lot of people complaining that we are not getting our pension on time. We are not getting our money on time. We have this and that and that and the other. Or my father has passed away. He was a member of this fund. He has not gotten anything. Or it's my wife who has gone. Or it is my husband. And Mr. Speaker, I am asking and I am appealing to members of the County Assembly to really take time. If I were you listening to Senator Mngatana here today, I would quickly run to the umbrella organization and ask for a meeting that would authorize the hiring of lawyers to just look at how you can improve this law so that this money that is coming in, this fund that you are creating, nobody is going to play around with it. And Mr. Speaker, I think time has come, and maybe time is now, that people like the administrator, who is the CEO of this fund, they must also put a bond, put a property, or put some cash in an account, that if money goes missing, then this fund will have a lien on the money that you have put as a bond. Mr. Speaker, it is not an outrageous requirement. It happens. Most people who are living on rental properties, and we used to live in rental properties, Mr. Speaker, when you go into a house, you pay a deposit. And that deposit says, in the event that the house is in disrepair, I will access that money to put that house in a correct manner so that the next person who is taking over the responsibility of tenantship would be entering a house which doesn't have dents, the doors are broken, the toilets is leaking, and so forth, the taps aren't working. So we need to have serious CEOs, people who are going to be vetted not just by EACC and so on, not just a certificate of good conduct, but people who would even put their own property. They are willing to put down a title deed that is going to stand as a lien, Mr. Speaker. They are willing to put down cash bond inside a bank. If money is misappropriated, that fund can access that fund, the bond, the security bond, immediately to recover. So that, Mr. Speaker, we have people who are serious about the jobs they are given. And if possible, Mr. Speaker, very serious jail terms should be discussed on these people who are taking responsibility, the administrator and the entire structure. And I'm urging the members of the County Assembly to really take time, because there's a way that we can enrich this law. Let us not say excellent. We now are creating a fund that will help us to survive when we get out of office, and then we leave it there. You will be the first person who would be crying there in the streets if you go there and you find your money has been eaten and the person is still sitting there, there's no fund, or they deliberately misinvested. Mr. Speaker, billions of shillings are going to be raised in this fund. We need to have duty of care, and the duty of care must be exercised at a very high level. So that, Mr. Speaker, we do not want this fund, Mr. Speaker, all the money that they are collecting, you hear they have put it in some long-term investment. And when the money is required to start sorting out the people who need it, the retirees, there is no money to give to them. So, Mr. Speaker, personally, as I second this bill, I am asking members of the County Assembly, we are passing this law for you. And I know speakers, 47 speakers, somewhere, some of you are listening to me. Some MCAs are listening to me. We are passing this law because for many years, every time since I was elected here as a member of the Senate, we have seen a lot of delegations from County Assembly, people discussing the point that when we finish here, what happens to us? Now the law is with you. Don't sit there and the law is passed and it is not satisfactory, and then you are the first person to complain. I'm asking that this law be improved so that it can encompass in it IT, you know. A lot of payments nowadays, Mr. Speaker, are done through M-Pesa. They are done through bank transfers and so on. And many of the MCAs would be able to transact easily if these provisions are made inside here, so that you do not have to come all the way from Tana River to come and collect your pension in Nairobi. Because this fund, because it is going to be for all the 47 counties, it's going to be operationalized from Nairobi. So you don't want a law that allows for you to travel. If you are from Garissa, you are from Isiolo, you are traveling all the way, you are coming all the way to Nairobi just to come and collect a few shillings. So this law, I believe, if it is improved, it will serve the purpose for which it was created. Mr. Speaker, as I come to finish my submissions, I want to state that when you look at the provisions which are at the end of this bill that we are creating, these are called the saving and transition provision. Mr. Speaker, it is proposing that the members and staff of county assemblies who are members of the local authorities provident fund and the LAP Trust Umbrella Retirement Fund shall be transitioned into the scheme within 6 months upon the commencement of this act. Mr. Speaker, right now we have left the National Hospital Insurance Fund, HIF, and Kenya is transitioning to SHIF and to SHA. Mr. Speaker, there has been a lot of uncertainties, Why? Because when we were writing the law, the savings and transition provisions were not clear. And Mr. Speaker, it's not enough to just say within 6 months you will be automatic members of the other side. What happens to those contributions within that period of time? Mr. Speaker, what happens to the people who are working in the other provident funds? Are they going to be absorbed? Is it correct to just leave it so wide? Because this whole section, this whole part on savings and transition is only 3 clauses. I am inviting, again, the eventual consumer of this law. These are the county assemblies, the county assembly forum, to look at what are the proper transition clauses that you can put in here. And if you're listening to me, it would be very useful to have clarity on every issue surrounding the provident funds which you are already serving in. For example, there's a clause here I think should be obvious, that the places where you are, the provident funds where you are already serving, they should produce statements within these 6 months. And these statements should be transitioned. Automatic operationalization of your accounts should be transitioned. If new accounts are being created, what is the process? Can these accounts be linked to your phone number? How are we going? You know, it should be that detailed so that you don't have problems. We don't have people like now we are hearing, oh, NHIS was like this, SHIF and SHAF. You know, we don't want this kind of untidiness when we are transitioning from existing provident funds to this new one, which is going to accommodate everyone. So, Mr. Speaker, I second this bill very strongly, and I believe it is a way of helping the many members of the County Assembly who have served in this republic and in Tana River County, so that, Mr. Speaker, when their term is over, they are able to live a decent life. I fully support this bill, and I'm urging every colleague who will stand, because we are the senior brothers in the devolution family, and because we are the ones who are working with our brothers in the County Assembly, and because we care and we have seen what they have gone through, Mr. Speaker, I urge that every senator will speak to this bill, will support it,